Brian Vaughn and Van Lee are two friends and lifelong Star Wars fans, but their love of George Lucas's Space Baby is not the same. For Van, his obsessive fandom allowed him to win the 2019 Star Wars Trivia in the Park contest in Springfield, Missouri, where his defeat of a man who brought a 2-liter of Diet Mountain Dew to a 1-hour event is local legend. For Brian, he thinks it's okay to call clone troopers stormtroopers. It's here that their fandom collides as the duo watch and comment on the movies, shows, and stories as only one nerd and one super nerd can. It's podcast, A Star Wars Story. That's right. Welcome everyone to podcast, A Star Wars Story. I'm your host, Van Lee, and it is time to cover Attack of the Clones. I'm joined by Brian Vaughn in the studios today. How are you, Brian?
Let's just say I have a lot to talk about, as do you, today, so I'm doing great.
Do you have any clones out there of yourself?
No, but I have been attacked by them. Not clones of me, but clones of other people.
Is this a multiplicity kind of situation, or...?
Yeah, after I got done fending off the first clone, it actually became easier and easier because of how inept each subsequent clone was.
Also, it was Michael Keaton the whole time.
Yeah, all
Pretty
of them
cool.
were Michael Keaton.
Well, in today's episode, we'll be covering, like I said, Attack of the Clones. This is the second movie in the Star Wars trilogy. It is largely considered to be one of, if not the worst one. I know in the past you have said it's your least favorite. Do you still adhere to that?
So far, I mean, I plan on reformulating my opinion as we go through this podcast and we run the old 9-movie series, but right now I'll tell you, yes. And a lot of it's for different reasons than I would have assumed. When I saw this movie initially, it was when it came out, I was 17, and I went on a date to go see this movie. This is the first time I felt kind of disappointed by a Star Wars movie in a bigger way.
Sure.
Like with a lot of media I took in as a teenager, I couldn't really put it into words until watching it for this podcast and analyzing it more. We'll get into it, but yeah, I don't like this movie, and it's for different reasons than I would have assumed.
And I do want you to tell us your opinions on the whole series and if anything's changed when we get finished with this, because in particular, Attack of the Clones, to me, yeah, I agree. It's a bad one. It's a bad movie, just straight up.
Yeah.
However,
has a lot of problems.
As a deep lore fan, there's a lot going on here that's really cool. And I'll, of course, explain that as we go through this episode. It's just badly acted in a lot of ways. The dialogue is weird. It was a technical marvel. This was the first movie to be filmed entirely on digital, I believe it was, whatever's particular digital camera it was George Lucas used for this. And mere months after The Phantom Menace, the production started on this movie. But, for example, the CGI is better in this. It's still not great. It's textural. In The Phantom Menace, when you see things, it's all one flat, shiny color.
It's a lot less like somebody taped a Yoda on your screen.
Yes.
When he's floating around in his cool chair.
It's just, and he has it. It might be a toilet. We don't know.
Hey, it can be both.
But you see more grittiness from the texture in this. And actually, I watched a whole documentary in preparation for this podcast about the making of Episode 2. And a lot of that will come through in our podcast here. But overall, it was a very groundbreaking film as far as the technology used. Now, let's get into this here. One huge debate that comes up from this is film purists get mad. Like, you need to film on film.
Sure.
You cannot do this. This is absurd. It's a new thing. No. We're making art here. You need to film Star Wars on film. You can tell how I feel about it. How do you feel about that? Do you think that all movies should be just on film? Is new technology inherently bad?
No, and I mean, this is something I actually do have a passionate opinion on, weirdly, in that I think to say any medium should be confined to one way of doing it, especially with the technology that you use, is classist in general. To say if you can't afford to shoot this, which obviously Star Wars can be shot on anything, they're wealthy, but just as a principle, like for instance, I write and record music, and if someone were to say you have to do this on tape in a studio, I would have to say, I don't have $50,000 to blow. You know, I record with digital software on my computer. That's what's available to me. I use it. It doesn't make what I do any lesser. I feel the same way about film. I mean, you can shoot it on whatever. You're still making a moving picture, if you will, a motion picture with characters, with plot, with dialogue, with setting, with sound. Yeah, it's an argument that I've always been frustrated by when Christopher Nolan's making it while having his friends blow him cool with palm fronds or whatever.
And yeah, the true answer is it depends. Because if I'm sitting down to watch like a Neil Breen movie or
Yeah.
the next big budget explosive superhero movie,
Two of them the same.
they don't need to be on film with the grainy and the 24
Yeah.
frames per second feel and all that. If you're making an art house film that has depth and you want that particular feel, by all means use that. And it should be used on a particular way to make you feel that way.
Absolutely. But then you have like directors that have come across plenty of acclaim, like Steven Soderbergh is a famed example, who's like, whatever, I'll shoot this thing on my cell phone. I don't care. Like, I have a movie I want to make.
Totally agree. And again, this is a Star Wars movie. Who cares? It's supposed to be fun and stupid and all that. We'll debate as to whether or not it achieves that goal.
Stupid. It's very stupid. And it is fun at times. To double back to your lore comment, that's the stuff I had the most fun with in watching Attack of the Clones this time around. Doing this podcast, you've explained a lot more about the lore, and it's caused me to research more. So it's more gratifying picking up on the small details and having fun with the side characters, maybe not spending as much time being frustrated with the main characters.
Yes. When they filmed it, basically Lucas filmed everything, almost everything. Really, the only true scene that was filmed on set, on a set, is the nightclub scene that we'll get to here shortly.
Oh, yeah.
Almost everything else in the movie was pure blue screen.
Wow.
And that was very new. Now, we'd had blue screen, and Lucas did a lot of blue screen work on Phantom Menace. This movie just took it to the next step.
And that bar scene, the one that's not, pretty cool scene.
Is really cool, yeah. Now, a lot of the actors struggled with that because, again, new technology, they'd never done this. The actors who didn't are the theater guys. Things like Ian McDiarmid, because you're used to not having to. Sometimes you have to act against
Ewan McGregor, too.
Ewan McGregor did a great job. But then you'll see Hayden Christensen, who's a new actor, or, I don't know, basically any of these guys who would be of that new age of actors who want to be with a physical presence. I get it. I totally understand it. It makes it a little tougher to do with the blue screen.
Yeah, and you know that going in, they want this job, they're going to take it and maybe not think about that aspect of it. I certainly would if I was cast in Star Wars.
Just wait until that phone rings and it's Disney on the horn to get you into Star Wars. Episode 15, Jar Jar Strikes Back.
And I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, and he's certainly not dead. He's doing better stuff now, and he's certainly more capable now. But Hayden Christensen, you mentioned him struggling with the blue screen. He just really struggles in this movie. Or that's my interpretation of it.
Well, let's talk about him now. He was a virtually new actor. He was a Canadian child actor. He'd found some success here and there. He did star in 2003's, it's the Stephen Glass movie. Did you ever watch this? Shattered Glass.
No, I didn't, but I think that's like a performance that people have said he's pretty good at.
He garnered award consideration.
And that would have been a year after this movie came out.
2003. So, to circle back to something I think I said on our very first introductory show, if you sit down and you watch this movie and you form an opinion on Hayden Christensen, it's going to be a bad opinion.
Yeah.
If you sit down and watch Revenge of the Sith, it's going to be like, yeah, whatever, that was fine. I think this was more a case of Lucas's direction, weird dialogue, having to do the blue screen stuff, having all this pressure put on you, and being very new to everything. He very much struggled.
Absolutely. And like, I don't want to, again, I'm not going to rag on him too much when I think Samuel L. Jackson struggles with the direction and dialogue of these movies. He comes across awkward. I've never thought that about him in any other movie. Natalie Portman, especially in the first one.
Oh, she was
in
bad
the
in
Phantom
the first
Menace.
one. Much better here.
She is handling herself much better in Attack of the Clones, but it is really actually brings the stark contrast like up in your face when you then hear Hayden Christensen kind of bumble through his lines and read them awkwardly in ways that I'm surprised they didn't retake. I don't know. It's just it kind of has a little bit of an uncanny feel to it.
Well, let's do some fun facts here about the production of this movie, and then we'll get into the plot. The working title for this, all in pre-production, was Jar Jar's Big Adventure. And of course, Lucas did that because of the backlash from the first movie, but I love that.
Obviously, he's in this movie a lot less than he was in The Phantom Menace.
Certainly is, and yet he's still so impactful to the universe.
Yeah, in negative ways.
The script for this movie was actually finished just 1 week before filming was to begin. Lucas was tweaking it, and he tweaked it as he went along. We'll talk about scenes where they actually had to do reshoots. And what they did is they brought all the actors back. Now, at this point, Ewan McGregor is working on whatever military movie it was around this time, I forget. And so he'd shaved his head and his beard.
Oh, wow.
So he didn't have time to grow it back. They used a wig and a fake beard, and you can tell which scenes have that. And I'll point some of them out. So a lot of the rewriting happened constantly. And part of that was because Lucas really didn't even want to write this. He just couldn't get anyone else to do it.
I mean, we were available.
Well, I was 17, so yeah. But I could have written a great movie.
What else were we? Yeah.
Every single clone trooper in this movie and the next movie is CGI. The only times it's not is when we see Tamura Morrison standing there talking. And that's it. Every other clone trooper in action, CGI. I didn't realize that when I was a kid.
No.
And you can tell now that I've been told you that.
Super obvious.
And it's painfully obvious in a lot of cases. But even some of the larger way back shots, you could almost see that they did the duplication trick like they use of the actors in this movie. But anyway, that was surprising for me to find out.
It's like a lot of technology in movies where another thing that happens is 20 years pass and you've just seen all the movies released in the 20 years intervening.
Mm-hmm.
So then you go back and you watch it and it's just way more obvious because of course we can do this better now.
No, certainly. Did you know that NSYNC, the boy band, shot cameos as Jedi and were going to appear in the final battle of Geonosis, but eventually were cut from the movie? There's no explanation why. No one's actually said why.
But they just told him bye when they were on the set?
They told him just that. Apparently, the rumor is that this got out as a rumor before the movie came out, and people hated it. They ragged on it so bad that Lucas just said, okay, I won't
People like to
it.
pretend that the internet community fan bases were only recently became bad.
Right. It's been bad
It's
ever
always
since it
been
came
this
around.
way. Yeah. I mean, and who would have cared if they did, especially if they got braids? Like if they were Padawan.
Little Padawan braids,
yeah.
Sure. Well, Terrence Stamp, your favorite, Chancellor Valorum,
Woo!
was supposed to come back for this movie. Completely declined. I think we mentioned this last time.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't pay him the big, huge sum of money he wanted.
Well, he hated the green screen, blue screen effects. And in fact, the only reason he signed on was because he wanted to do scenes with Natalie Portman.
Oh.
He arrives to set and he's like, where's Natalie? And Lucas is like, that's Natalie. And it's just an X on the ground. And so he hated that. Then they called him in for reshoots for Phantom Menace. Wouldn't pay him anymore because it was his contract.
He's probably like, I'm staying in England. I'm never coming back.
He was so mad. And then Lucas gave him some Star Wars stencils in lieu of pay. Yeah, so he declined.
Oh, man. You know what he should have given him instead of stencils?
What's that?
Stamps. Because his name is Terrence Stamp.
Yeah, I understand the reference.
Okay. I'm making sure everybody knows the joke I'm making. That's how jokes are funny.
People love it when you explain them to them.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Yoda was originally a puppet in the last movie, The Phantom Menace. This movie, he's replaced with CGI. You may not have noticed that.
I thought it was Ben Kingsley.
Had you watched that on Disney Plus or most renditions of the movie now, they went back after the series was done and replaced Yoda with a CGI character in The Phantom Menace. So the puppet's no longer there. There's a reason why, Brian. Now, you're giving a face. If you go back and look at stills or images, that puppet looks awful. The puppet from The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, is great. Whatever they did in the Phantom Menace original cut is terrifying and weird. So I think it was a better move here. However, this is officially the first CGI Yoda movie.
Yeah. Oh, man. And Yoda's frustrating in this movie. And it has nothing to do with him being CGI.
What does it have to do with him being a frog?
Nothing about that, actually, either. It's more about him, perhaps not picking up on some warning signs.
And then finally, in my research for this podcast, I watched a lot of George Lucas videos about the movie. Did you know that he pronounces Hoth as Hoth, and he pronounces Geonosis as Geonosis?
Wow.
And then finally...
Did he watch the movies?
I don't know if he paid attention at any point when making or watching the movies. He also says Han Solo.
Han Solo.
Which I guess Lando says it about a dozen different ways in the movies.
He says Han a lot. And I think, again, more because Billy D. Williams is like, whatever. Han Solo.
So there we go. A few behind-the-scenes facts about Episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
Well, hold on. I've got a couple of behind-the-scenes facts of my own I'd like to share.
Let's hear it.
First is Brian's Age Corner. I like to update everybody on how old our principal actors are. Well, this time, Anakin and Padme Amidala are the same age. Because Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman were both born in 1981.
And the reason Lucas cast Christensen, because a lot of people tried for that role, DiCaprio was even listed as maybe doing it.
Yeah.
He picked Hayden because supposedly Hayden had a very good repartee with Natalie Portman, and he just liked how they got along with one another.
Now,
maybe that doesn't show up in the movie.
I think maybe George has a different idea of how people communicate than you or I.
Yes.
To be fair. Yeah, and you're right. Leonardo DiCaprio, apparently, they contacted him about it, and he said he was not ready for that sort of role, like a franchise role at the time, which, who knows, he was pretty young then. Other people that were in the running, Paul Walker and Ryan Phillippe, which both seem weird in retrospect. Possibly Christian Bale and Heath Ledger, though those aren't confirmed. And Colin Hanks, who I guess didn't get very far.
He's is that Tom Hanks' kid?
Not the rapping one, though.
Not the awful one.
It is the one who is an actor,
okay,
to be fair. Not the one that's just gum on a shoe, from what I can tell.
Well, the movie opens, and we are treated yet again to the staple text in space that we all know and love. The horns toot and doot, and as they do, we learn through the crawl that 10 years have passed since the events of the Phantom Menace. Shit has been flung at, but not quite hit the proverbial fan. And you see there's even more unrest in the Galactic Senate, as many planets and systems decide the Republic is failing them. Under the leadership of the mysterious Count Dooku, which is not poop, it's apparently a Japanese word for like manipulative or something.
So that's really cool, though, that they mentioned Dooku in the opening crawl, too. That must mean he's really prominent in this movie. So we'll definitely be talking about him a lot in this episode, right?
Yeah, we certainly won't see him at minute 158 for the first time. Under his leadership, a separatist organization has formed that has made it difficult for the Keepers of the Peace, the Jedi, to maintain the order. The Senate is holding a vote on whether to create an Army of the Republic. And the former Queen of Naboo and now Senator, Padme Amidala, is en route to Coruscant to place her vote against said Army of the Republic. Now, before we get too into this, I do want to mention that while the core group of separatists are painted as, cackling evil villains,
right?
For the sake of making it simple for like kids and people watching the movie, you don't have to pay too much attention to realize that's the bad guy.
You can play with your Lincoln Logs or tater tots or whatever.
Like kids do, tater tots. They head to Sonic before they start
put your carburetor
watching.
back together.
A lot of the planets that did join the separatists are not evil. They just feel like they're not being served by the Republic. So they had to paint this as black and white, and Star Wars often does. That's not the case if you look a little bit deeper into the movies, the lore, the comics, that sort of thing.
And I do think, again, this is a thing watching it, in my 30s, it did come across. I did think about that. Of course, there would be people who would separate and decide to say, hey, I'm done with the Republic because things aren't going well for them. And they don't know the inner workings. They don't know who has not been betrayed.
Well, Count Dooku, to this point, he was a former Jedi, and he basically was just a really charismatic leader. It's Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
That guy speaks, I listen.
The guy oozes cult leader. If anyone does, it's Christopher Lee.
Well, Dooku came from wealth before joining the Jedi Order. That's why he's a count. So he became a Jedi. He renounced his estate and all that.
I think it's because he's a Dracula. I don't think it's because of that.
He was a Dracula in that movie, Dracula.
He was. Christopher Lee, yeah. Who is a natural Dracula.
Yes. Dooku's basically the perfect candidate to lead an uprising. He's got money, charisma, and of course he has a vested interest in taking down the Jedi and the Galactic Republic. He, at this point, maybe doesn't mean it maliciously, but he sees what we should see, which is that the Jedi Order isn't the beacon of righteousness that it thinks it is.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Dooku is his means and methods aren't good.
Right.
And no one's going to approve of those. But you definitely can see why he would take a look at the Jedi and say, look, the state of the galaxy is where it is because the Jedi just kind of sit on their hands.
He's very much the Magneto character of, I have to do the awful things so that we can survive and succeed.
Yeah, and he's got magnets.
Is that what the Force is?
Well, kind of, yeah. I mean, in the new Obi-Wan Kenobi show, that's what it is for Kumail Nanjiani's character.
That's very true.
Haja.
Correct. Oh, and by the way, the character of Count Dooku, terrible racist. Well, I guess speciesist. He believed that humans were the ones, and he looked down on other species. Yeah.
He is evil. I don't want to go out to speak out of class here.
And I don't really know that we have a whole lot more on Dooku this episode, because, again, we're covering the first half of the movie.
Yeah, and he does not appear in the first half of the movie. We kind of already mentioned that, but which is weird to me, and in rewatching this, not what I expected.
Yeah, agreed. Now, we'll cover him next episode when we finish up the movie, and there'll be a lot more stuff on there. I think Dooku's a very interesting character.
He is, yeah.
And there's a lot to it.
We don't want to blow our Dooku load this early.
Not yet. Give us 20 minutes, then we'll do that. Now, after the giant space paragraphs speed towards the outer rim, we see what we always see in Star Wars, a spaceship doing spaceship things. This one is a Nebulian transport shuttle. It's being guarded by multiple Nebulian fighters, and it carries Senator Amidala on her way to the Senate building. Padme, in the 10 years since the first movie wrapped up, she had her reign of queen end, and she has now replaced Palpatine as the senator for her dumb planet. Padme is one of, if not the greatest voice protesting the formation of the Army of the Republic. All right, I'll stop doing that.
It's what the movie wants you to say.
All caps. All space caps. Settling down on the landing dock, instead of focusing on the main transport shuttle, we're mostly keeping an eye on the particular fighter, and we hear the familiar beeps and whistles of R2-D2. He's, of course, badass robot and noted lover of C-3PO.
Mm-hmm. And this gets the movie off on the right foot, because here I am being like, Attack of the Clones, but then I see R2-D2, he's cute, he beeps.
Makes it great. Good to go. The pilot climbs out of the ship, and for some reason walks a lot like a galactic senator might walk. I don't know. I don't get it. This not senator joins up with another pilot and removes his mask to reveal the face of Gregor Typho. Now, Typho is the nephew to last movie's Captain Panaka, I guess the leader of the guard.
And what happened there? Why is Panaka gone?
So the actor who played Panaka, Hugh Quarshie, I believe, he said, I will return for the role, and he was supposed to, but he said, I get to see the whole script. And Lucas, this is the first spoiler area kind of movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not the first.
It was earlier on in that. I mean, 2002.
So no, you don't. You're Captain.
You're Panaka. Yeah,
you don't get the full script.
Yeah, if Samuel L. Jackson wants it, you probably let him have it. But yeah,
but not Hugh Quarshie. No offense, Hugh Quarshie.
Yeah,
but that's just how it is. Well, he just declined. He said no thanks. So they had to create a new character. So they did. Thus, we have Typho, who is played by New Zealand actor Jay Lagaya. I hope I got that right. It is a Pacific Islander name.
A Maori name, right?
It's a Maori name. He's a Kiwi, so yes. Yeah. So, and we see a lot of those actors, of course, in this. Timur Morrison being the Kiwi, and Daniel Logan, who plays young Boba. Mm-hmm. More on them later.
And a lot of different young Bobas, kind of. He kind of plays millions of them.
It's 200,000 on the way. Well, no, I guess that'd be the big ones. And then it's 1 million more on the way. So millions of them. You're right. Typho notably had a cool permanent eye patch, which he wears after he lost his eye during the Battle of Naboo from the last movie. Kind of cool little tie-in.
I like that. I'm really into eye patches on movie characters. Maybe that's because I just watched Escape from New York again.
Good eye patch.
And Attack of the Clones. But it got me to thinking, if I, for some reason, needed an eye patch, I think I'd be more likely if it was a permanent one like this.
It's just stuck in
You don't have to fiddle with it.
No, not at all. I assumed that it was going to have, robots or magic powers. You could see through walls or whatever. Nope. Just
or pop out like a telescope. Be pretty cool.
Slowly extends out to people.
And then you can see the moons. Because I don't know what they can see from there.
Well, it'd be suns. You made it wrong.
2 suns.
Yeah, but there are a lot of moons even now in real life.
Yeah, in real life and in Star Wars
Jupiter got a lot of moons.
Oh, you should. Hey, have you checked out the moons on Jupiter?
Have you seen Io? Is that how you pronounce it? I-O?
What about, I guess so.
Or Titan?
What about these rings that Saturn's got? Ooh, I'm telling you.
Somebody liked it. They put a ring on it.
Mercury's hot.
We glimpse the senator and her procession of M. Bison cosplayers coming down the ramp of the transport ship. And Captain Typho says to the mysterious first pilot, "We made it. There wasn't any danger after all. Everything's coming up, Typho."
By the way, any time in Star Wars, and probably any movie where someone's like, what an auspicious lack of danger. That's just, don't say that out loud.
No. Well, cue a deadly explosion, which rips through the transport ship. It sends guards and the senator flying violently through the air. Typho and the pilot we met in the beginning are knocked to the ground, and as soon as the two regain their footing, they rush to the bodies of their fallen comrades. Approaching the singed senator, the unknown pilot removes their helmet to reveal Senator Amidala.
What?
Ooh, she's still up to her old tricks. And it paid off this time. She shouts, "Corday," as she checks on the fake senator, and Corday the handmaiden tells her, "Milady, I'm so sorry. I failed you." And then she dies.
And then she does the blood trickle head turn auto death that is movie shorthand for we're not going to show you the whole hospital thing.
Nope, this is it. Yeah. We're done. Move on.
This character's dead.
And of course, the problem I have with this is that she didn't fail her at all. She did her job great.
Yeah. Dying for Padme is her job, which is kind of fucked up, but it is true.
And we've got Rose Byrne later anyway. We don't need Corey.
Yeah.
Typho tells Padme she's still in danger here and does his best to drag her to the building. She laments that she should not have come back to the Senate, but he reminds her just how important this vote is and how apparently they can't just zoom in to do their votes. So with a look on horror...
Which they can. We see them zoom and hologram around all the time.
But apparently not in the Senate. With a look of horror on her face, she departs the bloody scene. In Chancellor Palpatine's office, we get to witness some of the most important members of the Jedi Order as they meet with the Chancellor. There's Yoda and Mace Windu, of course, we know, but also Plo Koon. We talked about him last time, Ki-Adi-Mundi. And there's some newcomers to the series at this point. I'd like to talk about them. We have Kit Fisto, who is a big squid. We have Luminara Unduli, and then we have her apprentice, Barriss Offee. Now, we can see Palpatine has pulled out his nicest teal furniture for the guys because they're having a sit here. They're discussing...
Well, he's nice. He's not evil.
No, not even slightly. So he's talking a little bit about this war and kind of what's going on.
One thing I really like about this scene is how impatient Palpatine is. He's like, I don't know what the problem is. We need to hurry up and vote. More people are joining the Separatists each and every minute.
Look at it this way. You probably have a full schedule as the Chancellor of the universe.
Especially like when you're a really scheming one.
What?
I mean...
He's a kindly old man.
Scheming for good. I mean,
okay. Yeah. Certainly he's scheming for good. Palpatine tells the Jedi Masters he can't hold off the vote much longer, but he refuses to let the Galactic Republic be split in two on his watch. Mace Windu tells him if it comes to war, there simply aren't enough Jedi to protect the Republic.
Just the guy you want to tell that to.
After all, they are the keepers of the peace, not soldiers. Palpatine turns his attention to Yoda and asks him if he really does think this will come to war. Yoda's a little bit startled at this point. It just kind of makes me think he wasn't really paying attention.
Yeah, and he just gives that vague, like, oh, the dark side's clouding what I can see, which is a big focal point of this movie. They don't want the Sith knowing that. Little do they know, again, we're telling Palpatine all of this stuff.
Well, Yoda is, of course, speaking in his riddles, and then a hologram pops up out of the Chancellor's desk, and a Rodian advisor yells some stuff in Huttese. It turns out Padme has arrived, so Palpatine dismisses the Jedi, who get to go greet the senator. Yoda walks up to her first and tells her the tragedy on the landing platform has really harshed his buzz.
Then he walks away for 30 minutes.
But it does warm his little green heart to see her alive and looking so fine.
I believe Jar Jar said it. His words were pity hot.
Pity hot, yes. But Padme, seemingly used to anyone and everyone trying to marry her, she gets right to business, asking if they found anything out about the terrorist attack. Mace Windu pipes up and says it looks like disgruntled spice miners on the moons of Naboo, but Padme says, I believe Count Dooku is behind this.
So right away we know this Dooku is someone that could be an issue. The other thing this scene does is show Mace Windu as a guy who just doesn't really want to deal with the real problem. I don't know if that's, you know much more about Mace Windu than I do, if that's in his character, but at least early in this movie he seems really dismissive of a larger threat, even though, I mean, we saw in The Phantom Menace, larger conspiratorial threats have happened to them.
He's a zealot, is really what he has been through. So he believes that if the council votes one way, that's basically the Force saying this is how it is and it's right.
The frustrating part of a lot of the Jedi.
Yes.
The rigidity.
And in fact, I watched another video recently that talked a little bit about some of the books and comics that we've seen. And it turns out that Qui-Gon and Mace Windu secretly just hated each other. Because they're opposites in that regard.
Yeah.
Whereas Qui-Gon will do the opposite of what the council says sometimes. Mace Windu adheres to it strictly.
That explains him here, because it is, he very casually is just like, it's probably some spice miners that don't like the way you vote.
To be fair, storming the Capitol, you just get mad about maybe an election.
And we'll get into this more when we talk about Anakin, but I do think that there are some modern day parallels to real life presented in this movie.
Certainly. After Padme accuses Count Dooku, Ki-Adi-Mundi gets fucking pissed. And he tells her, Count Dooku is a political idealist, not a murderer, you dumb bitch.
And then everybody's kind of like, yeah, Count Dooku's awesome and nice and cool, and he bought us all drinks once. He's great. Shut up.
Yeah, Mace Windu, he's a good buddy. It's not in his character to assassinate anyone.
No, like, how dare you even mention any other ideas?
Yoda was his master. So Count Dooku was Yoda's Padawan. We find that out much later in the movie, but I'll tell you here because you've probably watched the movie by this point if you're listening to this show.
I would hope so. Then again, maybe this is a better way to do it. Just experience us talking about it.
This is a better way. So yeah, listen to this first. Well, he doesn't quite go all the way that Ki-Adi-Mundi and Mace Windu do. He's just kind of like, let's wait and figure it out. You know what? I'm not never saying never at this point. But he says, no matter what, it looks like Padme is still in grave danger. We got to figure this out. So Chancellor Palpatine decides to butt in from clear across the room, 30 feet away. You know, it might be a good idea if you Jedi put the senator under your protection. And we get a good look at the procession of weirdos who've joined Padme at this point. There's Jar Jar in there. One of these weirdos is, of course, Jimmy Smits. Now, Smits plays Alderaanian senator and vocal opponent of the Grand Army of the Republic, Bail Organa. We see him again in the Kenobi show, which came out recently.
I always like seeing Jimmy Smits when he pops up.
He's great. He's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he chimes in here and he says, is this a good idea? Padme starts to voice her displeasure at this concept, but Palpatine is having none of it. And he pleads with her, maybe we get someone you're familiar with, like perhaps Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi.
So Palpatine's game here essentially is like, he knows Padme can smell when his shit stinks. So he needs to get her as far away from this political intrigue as possible. And why not get Obi-Wan away from this as well?
I wonder, too, if because he's very clearly close with Anakin. So I bet Anakin's talked about Padme before or asked him, so he probably knows. So he's thinking push them together.
Yes. And I think that's a really wise kind of leap of faith to have in what the movie's saying, because I similarly think he was probably bitching and moaning about Obi-Wan when he talked to Palps as well. The combination of those two things, I'm sure Palpatine knows, if I draw Anakin in away from these guys who are influencing him in different ways, maybe I can get my hooks in.
I don't know why or how you think you figured Anakin out.
Yeah, what a character with just unbridled depth.
Mace Windu says, okay, why the fuck not? I'll have Kenobi report to you immediately.
Let me check the rule book. If it's in here, we can do it.
We next find the man himself, Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's in an elevator, zooming his way up. But next to him stands the now 19-year-old Anakin Skywalker.
Who is not Jake Lloyd.
Not Jake Lloyd anymore. No longer the round-headed Jake Lloyd, but now dopey-eyed Hayden Christensen.
Admittedly, with kind of a rectangular head. But like vertical rectangle.
Sure. Not as Hey Arnold-like Jake Lloyd.
Yeah, it's not a football head.
Christensen was also in the Virgin Suicides. I didn't mention that. Life is a House. He was in that. And that's right before he got the role of Anakin. So again, he was on his way, I guess we'll say up at this point.
What a wild career trajectory to be on your way up, to land like the main role in this big a franchise, and then have that derail your career. I legitimately do kind of feel bad for him.
In a way, yeah. And he basically, after the trilogy finished, said, fuck it, I'm going to go to Canada and be a farmer.
Yeah.
And he did.
Well, because, no, put yourself in Hayden Christensen's position. We talked earlier about how Leonardo DiCaprio allegedly declined the role. He was in a position to decline the role. He had already been in Titanic and all of that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? He can do that kind of thing. Hayden Christensen, there is no scenario where you're turning this down.
No.
So maybe you don't like what he did, but you cannot blame him for doing it.
And he was a big Star Wars fan. He talked about how cool it was to get that. And in recent interviews, because he came back in the Kenobi show, he's knowledgeable of the series. So he still really likes Star Wars, which is interesting considering all the flack he got from it.
And it just makes me like him more in a sense that, no matter what, he has reverence for this, which I'm not saying you would have to have to
but
be.
But it's nice when they do.
But it is nice, and it makes me a lot more forgiving.
Anakin frets a bunch, and Obi-Wan tells him he looks tense, and then there's some joking about a nest of Gundarks and all that. Anakin says he hasn't seen Padme in 10 years. That's why I'm so nervous.
Do you know more about Gundarks? Any of these weird things like this, I feel the need to ask if you have any deeper knowledge of them.
I don't have a ton of knowledge of them, but remember that they were first mentioned in Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
Where he says, when Han saves Luke, and he's in the back to tank, he says, you look strong enough to pull the ears off of Gundar.
And this was, it really, I did not recognize that upon hearing it, but I thought it sounded familiar, and that led me down the road of finding that out. And then I think I even looked up what they were and forgot.
So if you looked it up, they're just big monsters as well.
Yeah, okay, that's probably why I forgot. But I do like that that's a thing that reappears in the universe, because little phrases like that do reappear in speech.
After Anakin says it's been 10 years since he's seen Padme, it was at this moment in my note-taking that I wondered whether or not the Jedi were allowed to masturbate. Let's talk about it.
Let's definitely talk about this.
So I went down basically a wormhole. I Googled this. I searched.
That's actually what
Reddit
Jedi call it
forums.
when they masturbate, going down the wormhole.
Going down the wormhole. I found a quote from the man himself, George Lucas, in 2002 when this movie came out, because someone asked him about the love story aspect. He told BBC News that Jedi Knights aren't celibate. The thing is that attachment is forbidden and possessive relationships are forbidden, not the emotions that could be associated with it or the
not
release,
banging it
if you will,
out.
not banging one out. So I think here's my headcanon
Okay.
with masturbation and Anakin in particular. I think he thought about
Headcanon. Nicely done. I don't even know if you meant to.
That's his wormhole. I thought about every night he thinks about Padme, right? And he doesn't understand what to do with these emotions.
He just wants to shoot his jizz all over the wall.
I think he did it a couple of times, but then felt miserable, almost like a choir boy it's been screamed in their head their whole life that masturbation is evil.
Right, because he's had a weird life. He's lived on a desert planet as a slave and then was immediately treated as royalty thereafter, like Harry Potter.
So basically, I just believe that he has shamed himself into bottling up these emotions, and that only adds to him being just a unhinged lunatic as we go forward.
Yeah,
here.
and let's talk about it now. Anakin in this movie is horny.
Oh, very horny.
Just that's the one thing that we get from Hayden Christensen, and it's also his flirting style is angry. So he kind of just goes about it in like a way of throwing his lust at everyone on the screen.
And I do think that Padme's in the Bad Boys.
Yeah,
because it's really
clearly
when he goes nuts that she's like, finally, okay, this'll do.
Yeah, and again, we'll reinforce this point, but for half the movie, Padme wants nothing to do with Anakin romantically, or it sure doesn't seem like it, despite the fact she is glad to see him.
Obi-Wan tells Anakin to go ahead and take a quick cold shower using the Force, and the duo head to Padme's suite.
Wait, hold on. One more thing about Jedi masturbation.
Mm-hmm.
Obi-Wan, I think, seems like the kind of Jedi who he jerks it a lot, probably, and is fine with it. He seems like at peace with himself, and because do we ever see Obi-Wan in a relationship or anything like that? Okay, all right.
I'm pretty sure I had this. I definitely had this in my notes later. We'll cover it here. In the Clone Wars TV show, Obi-Wan reveals that he had a fling for a woman named Satine Kryze. Do you recognize the last name? Probably not.
No.
Bo-Katan Kryze.
Oh, I was not aware of anything beyond Bo-Katan.
Yeah, she basically comes from the Kryze clan or tribe, whatever you want to say, of Mandalorians. I'll talk more about Mandalorians later. That's pretty important. But essentially, Satine Kryze was a politician on the planet Mandalore after the planet had become a little more peaceful than in the past. And Obi-Wan and her had like a fling or something. I don't know the details. They loved each other, but of course he was a Jedi, he couldn't do it. Eventually, spoiler, in the Clone Wars, Maul kills Satine to get at Obi-Wan. And he was devastated by this for a little bit. But yes, he has had a relationship.
Okay.
However, I'm going to come back to your main point. I don't know that Obi-Wan's the one that jerks it.
Okay.
I think what it is Qui-Gon was tugging at every chance he got.
Yeah, probably out in the open, too.
Yeah.
I don't think
he'd stand there in his robes just tugging away and talking to people.
Qui-Gon had a real 70s vibe. Like, he's probably inviting people over to like stag parties or something weird.
Put your keys in the bowl, and then we'll figure out what happens at the end.
Doesn't matter. We'll figure out what happens later.
Obi-Wan, I think, doesn't do it. Maybe he did when he was younger, but now he does believe in the Jedi Order, so he's centered himself to where he doesn't have to do it, but he also doesn't care if you do it.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is.
Do you think he uses his hands, or do you think they force Jo?
You have to use the Force at least once, right?
It's cleaner.
You call it the Stranger.
Yeah, I think it'd be awesome.
Midi-chlorians. I think it'd be awesome.
I'm just saying.
If you're honest. When the two arrive, they are greeted by our old friend Jar Jar Binks, and he stomps his way onto our screen with a delighted scream.
Senator Binks?
Sorry, Senator Jar Jar. Well, is he a senator at this point? Because he takes over for Padme.
I don't know. That's a good point.
He's an assistant.
He's got a robe on. Like, he seems really important.
Which, again, plays into the 70s. Like, put your keys in the bucket.
That's true.
We're all wearing robes.
We're all frog people from underwater. I will say this, like, I'm glad there's less Jar Jar in this movie. The character feels more appropriate having its screen time limited. But another lapse in Padme's judgment is letting Jar Jar rise in power. He's a moron.
I presume that there are a lot of Gungans. Roose Tarples would be a better assistant
Roose
senator.
Tarples would definitely be better. He definitely wouldn't just be like, Misa, don't know what to do. I'll listen to Palpatine.
I'll tell you what happened is Roose Tarples would be there for a vote. And if maybe the bill that they were working on gets voted down or something, he might turn to Padme and say, ouch time.
Use of Bombad.
Well, screaming Jar Jar calls Padme over, and she excitedly greets Obi-Wan, and she realizes just who Anakin is.
Annie? My goodness, you've grown.
So have you. Grown more beautiful, I mean. Well, for a senator, I mean.
Annie, you'll always be that little boy I knew on Tatooine.
Take that. I love it.
Oh, she shoots him down so good.
Pour that ice water on his braided head.
Yeah, just ouch time for him right here after that.
This is, again, I'm having a great time with his little incel bullshit the first half and her just shutting it right down. That's why it's so disappointing when she gives into it.
Just randomly caves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I guess, we saw him in The Phantom Menace with lines like, "Are you an angel?"
Yeah.
He knows to say the smooth things. It just doesn't come out smoothly.
The thing that struck me the most here is I saw this as a 17-year-old boy. And at the time and now, and this is one of the things I wanted to mention about why I realized this movie just, to me, really felt yucky then and does now. How are you supposed to identify with this character?
Bingo.
He is the center and the heart of this trilogy, and at no point is he likable. He comes across as petulant, mean, petty, just angry.
He's very good. He's obviously a great Jedi. He's powerful, he's strong, he's fast, he's quick. He has all these traits, and he does the things you want your hero to do.
Yeah.
He jumps off the speeder and lands on the other one with perfect timing using the Force.
He in
saves
theory,
the day.
delivers one-liners. They're not effective, and this is not Hayden Christensen's fault. They are lame.
They are very lame, and he's unlikable. And I think that was the main problem with this trilogy. If you had a charming Anakin,
I think it changes so much.
Of horror, it would have been so much better.
Never at any point do I not think this guy is going to become a monster. That's the problem. Is like I see a bratty kid who, for whatever the reason, I mean, even when he's on Tatooine, he's a little brat who is essentially given things and told how great he is, and does have all this natural ability, but when it comes down to it, he doesn't care about anyone but himself and the absence of something obstructing his path. If anything's in his way, he just gets so mad, he throws a little fit.
Padme's whole problem with the Jedi, basically giving her extra protection, I think there's I guess this isn't the way to say it, but I'm going to say it the way, like a machismo to it of, I don't need that. But also, she doesn't want to be disrupted. She wants to be free to do what she needs to do.
Yeah.
So Obi-Wan, right out of the gate, basically just says, we're going to do your best not to disrupt you. We'll be seen, not heard. Don't worry. Everything will be okay.
Because he understands that, I think.
And Captain Typho says he's grateful that they're here. Because again, Padme won't admit the situation is as dangerous as it is. She says she doesn't need security. She needs answers. Anakin, seeing the opportunity to get in her good graces, says, I'll do whatever it takes to get those answers for you. Obi-Wan gets a little pissed off about this. He tells Anakin in a hushed voice, like when an old married couple argues in public, we are not going through this again. You're going to listen to me. Anakin pulls off his best toddler impression and just says, why?
Ugh.
Rage begins to enter Obi-Wan's eyes, and Anakin decides to back down a little and do that thing where he pretends that he meant it differently than how it came out. He says, why would we be assigned to her if we're not supposed to be the ones to find out who's trying to assassinate her? So Obi-Wan takes a deep breath and says calmly to his annoying Padawan, we are doing exactly as the council instructed, nothing else, and you will learn your place.
This is exactly why the Jedi Council did not want Anakin as a boy. And he seems more unhinged here than he was at age 5 or whatever, or age 10.
The camera shifts to Captain Typho. He has a look of abject horror on his face, so he stares blankly at the ground, doesn't know what to do when Mommy and Daddy are fighting right in front of him. Padme tries to ease the tension. She says, maybe just with these two here, things will be a little less hectic, and anyway, it's time for bed.
Yeah, she's like, I'm getting out of here. This is awkward.
Padme and Rose Byrne head to the bedroom to pillow fight, while Typho, the Jedi, and Jar Jar head the other way. Typho and Obi-Wan discuss specifics, and we get a scene between quite possibly the two most obnoxious characters that have existed at this point in Star Wars. We have Anakin lamenting the fact that Padme was not immediately smitten by his bad boy, I do what I want attitude, and Jar Jar is just taking it in. But he's a good wingman.
Yeah.
He says, you know what? She's happy. Misa thinks she looks happier than she's ever looked.
That's true. And we should say, for Jar Jar's part, he is so excited to see Annie that he is, quote-unquote, busting with happiness.
At this point, Obi-Wan has walked over and he tells Anakin to be mindful of his thoughts and stop focusing on the negatives. But yeah, I mean, she was totally pleased to see us. I bet she likes me.
And this to me read as, and maybe this is just because I also think Ewan McGregor's better in this movie than he is in The Phantom Menace. And I think he plays this really well as, I'll throw you this bone, Anakin. Like, she does like that you're here, but please stay focused.
In the dirty skyline of Coruscant, we see a purple woman come bounding out of her ship as a Mandalorian figure comes walking out of the shadows. Now, this is our first timeline appearance of Mandalorians in Star Wars. And, of course, we have the Mandalorian armor. So let's touch on that. Mandalore, as a word, means multiple things, basically. It was, or partially is, a planet. It's a creed or religion. And I guess to sum it up as tightly as possible, I'd just say it's a culture.
A way, if you will.
The culture has been around for many, many years in the Star Wars universe. And Mandalorians originated from the planet Mandalore, like I said. And if you're wondering why I said kind of planet still, it's because essentially what happened in the Rebels and Clone Wars TV show is during the Galactic Republic Clone Wars fight, Mandalore again was more peaceful than they typically had been in the past, which was a power by strength kind of attitude. And they voted to be separate from the Separatists Galactic Republic fight. They were just stayed out of it. They were Switzerland in this regard.
Okay.
But there were other Mandalorian tribes. One of them is called Death Watch, and that is the one that the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, is a part of, or grew up into in the Mandalorian show. There's a guy named Gar Saxon and Clan Saxon. They were part of Death Watch, and they didn't like the pacifist version of Mandalore. They wanted to go back to the strong warrior style.
Oh,
so there was
they probably wore a bunch of red hats.
They kind of did, to be honest. It's really funny that you said it that way because of the armor.
The irony of it, weirdly, they're like, this is how we'll identify ourselves. We need to go back to how it was. I want to be able to beat my kid.
They utilized a very rare metallic substance, which is called Beskar. That's capable of deflecting lightsabers. And basically, they used tactics which allowed them to resist attacks from Jedi using the Force. They were, or still are in a lot of ways, the few warriors who can compete with a Jedi and not have magic powers.
Right.
And
because they're sort of trained specifically for no outside interference. Yeah.
Like thousands of years ago, there was a Mandalorian Jedi war in which the Mandalorians beat the shit out of the Jedi at times. So they're a very powerful group.
Though, to be fair.
This all ties into the movie because the Mandalorian figure we see here is Jango Fett. And he's a foundling, much like Din Djarin and the Mandalorian. At this point in the universe, we find out he's one of, if not the best bounty hunter in the galaxy. And it's also worth noting that Beskar, which is that metal that they use to forge Mandalorian armor, it's very rare. And as such, most Mandalorian armor to this point is like a hybrid. It's some Beskar, some Durasteel, some other substance. However, Jango's is full Beskar. So this is the real deal. This is the best armor.
And on that note, it's time for a break. We've lined up a few new sponsors for this week, so let's hear what they have to say. When we get back, we'll discuss this mysterious bounty hunter.
Asking the tough questions 4 days a week, it's Bibble Babble.
The people have decided.
The man who reinvented the talk show format posits all the hard questions other hosts are too afraid to ask.
What is your suggestion, Master Jedi?
This afternoon, Bibble gets to the bottom of Neimoidian warmongering, asking Viceroy of the Trade Federation Newt Gunray for some hard truths.
Newt Gunray, how will you explain this crisis?
You see, Governor, I was at the beach with my girlfriend Rune when a muscle man stole her away from me. He kicked sand on my deflated frog body. Now I'm at war with the Jersey Shore planet.
Unthinkable. There hasn't been a full-scale war since the formation of the Republic. This invasion will gain you nothing.
Bibble talks to politicians past and present, including his award-winning interview with former Supreme Chancellor Valorum.
I've lost favor amongst the people of the universe after some of the negative things published about me in the Gungan Underwater Times.
They wouldn't dare.
Oh, it's okay. I know what they say about me on Space Fox News.
It's outrageous.
No, don't worry about old Finis. I mean, I've managed to reach level 100 on Fortnite. And of course, I listen to all of the music that the people love, such as Billie Eilish.
When it comes to hard-hitting news reports on delicate subjects, C.O. Bibble doesn't back down.
Your negotiations seem to have failed.
Tune in Monday through Thursday at 1:30 p.m. on your local CW network.
A communications disruption can mean only one thing. Newt Gunray is dope.
Jango steps out of the shadows to talk to this purple woman, who we found out is Zam Wessel.
Pretty cool name.
It's a great name, and she's pretty cool. She's a fellow bounty hunter, and she's the one attempting to kill Padme. She's the reason the transport ship exploded. Jango tells her that his employer is getting impatient, so use these cool bugs that I found to kill the senator instead of your mini guns and explosions.
Oh, and her boss, of course, must just be disgruntled miners.
Yes, disgruntled spice miners. He tells her, Zam, there can be no mistakes this time. Back at the Senate building, Obi-Wan and Anakin are discussing the situation with Padme, and Obi-Wan asks what's going on with the senator right now. Anakin says that she covered up the security cameras, claiming, I don't think she liked me watching her.
Which to me implies that it wasn't like he has the cameras to periodically glance at and make sure everything's okay. He was leering into them.
I think he was staring unblinking at the cameras, and she knew it. She could feel it.
And this isn't us reading into it. We've already mentioned Anakin's a total creep and does not hide it.
This was the most obvious statement of the movie so far. Obi-Wan is perplexed at this, but Anakin says, don't worry, she programmed R2 to warn us if there's an intruder. And by programmed, I assume what he means is that R2 told them, I'll let you know if there was an intruder, because he seems to be quite smart and sentient.
Yeah, he gets a lot done over the course of all of these movies.
Obi-Wan figures out that actually Padme and Anakin have concocted a plan here to use her as bait to try and catch the assassin. The elder Jedi's a tad skeptical, but Anakin tells him, don't worry, I can sense everything going on in that room, such as the trickle of sweat falling down the soft, milky white skin. Okay,
That
Anakin,
isn't
that's
anything
enough.
like sand.
This whole time we've seen Anakin and Obi-Wan bicker and nag at each other, and the one piece of information we do need to know is that Anakin is having horrible nightmares about his mother, Shmi Skywalker. Oh, and Anakin, of course, says he's much rather be dreaming about Padme because she's intoxicating.
Yeah, I don't want to know what those dreams are.
Obi-Wan reminds him of his Jedi vow, which explicitly forbids dating senators, but just then, the two sense through the Force that a robot has cut through the glass window in Padme's room and dropped in those bugs that we saw earlier. Padme sleeps peacefully as the bugs make their way to her head, but before they can bite her or spit or whatever it is that these bugs do, Anakin leaps onto the bed with lightsaber aglow. He slices the bugs in half with nary a scratch on Natalie Portman.
And he's been wanting to leap on that bed. This is just not how he thought it would go down.
But it did give him an excuse.
And I do think he wanted space worms involved.
These bugs, by the way, are actually called cowhoons, and they have a stinger, which injects heavily toxic venom capable of killing a person in minutes.
They're big worms.
Big worms. Anakin attends to Padme, and Obi-Wan notices the robot outside of the window, so he decides his best course of action is to leap through the full plate glass window and grab onto the robot despite being thousands of miles above ground.
And I know, like, Obi-Wan's just acting quickly because he's like, this is essentially this orb is the assassin, so I'll go after it. But this doesn't make a ton of sense to be doing.
Did it know if it could hold his body weight? Did he know if he could actually get a grip on it?
Does he know what it is?
Does he know if it has a gun or something that could, like, shoot him? I think what this is one, this will go great and he catches it and everything turns out fine. Or two, he plummets to his death and never has to deal with Anakin Skywalker again.
So he's kind of in that moment using his Jedi senses to say, win-win.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Win-win. Fortunately for Obi-Wan, I guess, he gets a grip on the robot, which flies off in the distance, Jedi attached. Anakin rushes to find a speeder he really likes.
What's the number one point of what they're doing right now? Anakin and Obi-Wan. What are they?
An orb.
No, but what are they here to do?
Oh, to stop the assassination.
And to protect Padme Amidala to stay at her side at all times.
I think this is more, though, like, we can end this here.
Right.
So I don't mind.
I do see that, but, I mean, there literally are two different assassins. Jango and Zam.
Yes.
Theoretically, who we see in this point. The other one could just come in and off Padme right now. I guess it's like, in the moment, I was watching this thinking, Obi-Wan does not need your help, Anakin, to a certain degree, although he does, so that does kind of invalidate my point. But I did find it funny that over and over, Anakin gets rebuffed because they're like, stay put and protect Amidala.
Mm-hmm.
And
he does whatever.
in this moment, not only does he not do that, but Obi-Wan also thinks that's fine.
Well, we get a lengthy chase scene here, and I'm just going to hit the big moments, action scenes.
Yeah, this exists because it's fun to look at,
right,
for kids especially.
And it shows off the technology.
And it shows off a different part of Coruscant, I guess, than we see in the first movie, in The Phantom Menace.
Kenobi grasps the droid flying through the nighttime space traffic, and Anakin chases after him. And we see, at this point, a Doug in a speeder. He yells at Obi-Wan for messing up.
So that part is one of my favorite parts of this
What does he yell?
Movie. I think he yells like, fuck you, I'm gonna fuck you up and I'm better at pod racing.
That's precisely it. He yells, Jedi Poodoo, which is exactly what that translates to.
You've heard, Poodoo is a really popular Doug phrase, is what I have to assume.
It's a curse word, I guess, in the Star Wars universe. Now, this droid is returning to Zam, and she uses her extremely long gun to shoot the droid, which knocks Kenobi off of it. But by this point, Anakin is caught up, and he catches Obi-Wan with his speeder. The two Jedi spend a good 45 minutes chasing the bounty hunter, and there's some dumb Lucas jokes thrown in here.
A lot of the one-liners I mentioned earlier that, to be fair, even when they're not good, Ewan McGregor is such a natural, he's just a good actor, and he pulls off the line read the way you would think the line should be read.
Right. Anakin doesn't.
No,
in any of his lines.
It comes across really awkward. All of his emotions read the same way. Creep leering at you from the corner.
Anakin eventually lands on Zam's ship. She tries to shoot him while flying along. He tries to stab her. That old chestnut that we all know and love. Eventually, the ship is damaged and it crashes into the Coruscant streets, with Anakin falling off slightly before the crash. Zam rushes into a nearby nightclub with Anakin right behind her. Obi-Wan is finally caught up at this point, and before the Jedi head into the club, Kenobi lectures Skywalker and returns his lightsaber, which the Padawan dropped during the chase. Now, this club is called the Outlander Club.
It's cool. I'd like to add that in.
And the two Jedi look around once inside, and we're treated to quite the scene. We have weird aliens standing around getting drunk. They're watching big screen TVs on the walls.
Of spaceports.
Spaceports. Now, I'd like to talk about these spaceports.
I'm very glad that you have notes on this.
Well, first off, we have pod racing on the far left. We know what pod racing is.
We're very familiar with pod racing.
Everyone should be familiar with it at this point.
Who would you say is the number one? It's probably Sebulba,
Ben
right?
Quadraneros.
Oh, huh.
That's the thing. You're wrong. But the middle screen in this movie, we see a bunch of robots playing on what looks like a football field. Well, this game is called Noonaball.
Okay.
Noonaball has become a very popular sport in the galaxy the last 10 years. Originally, it was played by Gungans on Naboo with a critter called a Noona, and it's just this little turkey-like thing.
Was the Noona the ball?
Yeah, it was the ball. And when they get mad, they swell up. So there's a little bit of stuff to that, too.
Yeah. Is the Noona like the golden snitch?
Somehow makes more sense than Quidditch.
Can you explain to me on Quidditch?
Nope.
I know this is common, but like why you wouldn't all go for the snitch?
Well, I think only one is allowed to in the rules.
But why? That's a good point. But why isn't that just the whole focus?
It is the whole focus.
We need to
That's
protect.
the thing.
Why is there
stupid.
any other scoring?
There shouldn't be anything else happening.
Everyone should be protecting your seeker to get the snitch. Same goes with Star Wars with Noonaball.
Well, Noonaball, the Noona is also referred to as a swamp turkey in the universe, by the way.
That's really cool.
Side note means that turkeys, regular turkeys, exist in Star Wars. That's how I'm interpreting
Another
this.
real animal. We've been kind of tracking the real animals that also exist in the Star Wars universe.
Chimpanzees, alpaca.
And now turkey.
And turkey.
A simple turkey. That's how they have Space Thanksgiving, I have to assume, where they celebrate what they did to the horrible things they did to the space natives.
But watching Gungans punt birds is only so exciting, Brian.
Yeah.
So eventually the sport shifted to droid
You phrase it that way, though, and I want to see it.
And by the way, they have non-turkey balls at this point.
Okay.
The droids.
I'm glad that the turkeys got rights.
I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that Noonaball was actually protested by the Biological Athletes Union, which was a union fighting for the rights of non-robot athletes, as you might guess. They didn't like the new version of Noonaball because only robots can play.
Well, then that is a little bit exclusive.
Would you join like a signature list of people for the Biological Athletes Union fighting for their rights?
Yeah, I think anybody that wants to play Noonaball should be able to play.
And then there's also some sort of horse racing event going on on the screens in this cantina. I can't tell what these critters are, and I couldn't really find anything online about it. So if you are out there listening to this show and you know, email me.
Yeah.
bootuinc@gmail.com. You can reach us on Twitter, by the way. I'm at Manly Van Lee.
And I am at Loud Guitar Brian.
So let us know what kind of critter this is with this horse racing. Snoot horse, but it's not the snoot horse.
George Lucas, if you're listening, that goes for you too. Just let us know.
He's not doing anything. Of course he's listening to shows.
No.
In this club, there are a bunch of cameos here. We see C-3PO actor Anthony Daniels. He's there, and he's a human. He's not like a whiny twat of a robot in this case. Well, it's just Anthony Daniels.
Look, Van's opinions are just one man's opinions that do not express necessarily all of the host's opinions on C-3PO, the best character in Star Wars.
And also not wearing his whiny character costume is Ahmed Best, the Jar Jar Binks actor. He's here as himself. That's kind of cool.
I bet that felt good for him to just be in Star Wars, but not as Jar Jar for just a moment.
Not have to be that. And then, of course, there's a Lucas daughter here. He puts one of them in. I think it was Amanda. I can't recall. And again, like I said at the beginning of the show, this is basically the only scene in this whole movie that isn't pure green screen. There's still some of that going on. However, this is a set that was built. These are extras. They're not all CGI characters. And it looks great.
This seriously does feel different than the rest of the movie in a good way. It feels Star Wars-y, right? Like the original trilogy a little bit. We've got a weird setting that somewhat resembles a real-life setting we might encounter here on our little planet Earth.
You might go watch Nuna Ball at the local bar up the road.
With weird aliens. Any weird gathering place in Star Wars that feels very handcrafted, I'm always all for.
Oh, yeah. Anakin reveals to Kenobi that he believes Zam is not a he, but is instead a she. And anyway, none of that matters because she's a changeling, meaning shapeshifter.
So automatically cool. Shape-shifting assassin.
Now, see, Zam is a reptilian claudite. That's the name of the species. They're a species that can shapeshift. This, of course, wasn't necessary at all to the plot or really to the character or any of that. She was wearing a mask early on, so who cares what if she's a... Anyway.
It must just be to get another species in there, to say this is another kind of person that exists in Star Wars.
I'll tell you exactly what it is. It is another time for Lucas to show off his technological advances, because he added this in post-production. This was not in the script.
So he could get the face change in.
Yeah, originally Zam was just a person, just a regular human. But Lucas changed his mind, called everyone in for reshoots. And that's, of course, why Kenobi in these scenes has the fake beard and he just looks horrible.
This totally okay. This makes a lot more sense now. It really doesn't need to be in the movie.
No, it doesn't. And the other big one, and I'll go ahead and say this here, we'll cover it next episode, the whole droid factory sequence where Padme, C-3PO, R2, and Anakin are fighting Geonosians and avoiding being turned into droids. That was added in post-production as well. Lucas felt that the plotting or the pacing of the movie needed some action. So he thought, this'll do. It doesn't.
I'm going to say this right now. His inclination, I think, is correct.
Right.
This movie does sag a lot, but that's not... Just shoving a scene in does not fix your issue.
Yeah, he didn't correct the problem at all.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan tells Anakin to go and find Zam, and then he just heads to the bar to just get fucked up. Obi-Wan, by the way, in canon, this is in Clone Wars, this is all throughout, loves to drink. He loves his booze.
Look, Obi-Wan's going to get the job done for you Monday through Friday, but you get that bad boy out on a Saturday night, and he is going to get lit, right? That's what people say.
Sounds about right.
He's going to get tanked. He's going to get schlommed. He's going to get clormed.
What about crunched, or what was the other one?
Crunched, or, the other Jar Jarism.
Yeah.
It could be, Misa, not sure, but fleeped, snapped.
Ouch timed.
Any of these.
And there are a couple of Clone Wars episodes where Obi-Wan just gets blitzed off PBR. It's great.
He's actually, did you know Obi-Wan was the PBR spokesman for a while? Before, and few people know this, he was the original Keith Stone in the Keystone Light ads. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Not, again, little known fact.
Huh. Good to know.
I found this on the IMDb page for Attack of the Clones under Goofs.
Anakin walks to the bar looking for Zam, and Kenobi hits up the bartender for some shots. When what I can only imagine is the Star Wars version of a snork approaches him and says, "You want to buy some death sticks?"
And automatically, I'm like, I can't believe they waited this long to introduce the main character.
Kenobi uses his wizard powers on this guy. He uses a Jedi mind trick to make him go home and rethink his life, which is pretty aggressive, kind of a power move there.
Yeah.
You upending the guy's whole life with just a wave of your hand.
You know what this reminded me of? Is in Fight Club when Brad Pitt holds the guy up at gunpoint to try and make the guy appreciate life or some sort of thing. And to me, this was a lot like that. Like, you're kind of just wreaking havoc in the middle of someone's day here. Just say no.
But as you said, Monday through Friday, you can bother Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
You leave him alone when he's on his time.
Yeah, only people need to be sidling up to Obi-Wan at a bar. You know who? The women folk. Because as we established, sometimes Obi-Wan engages in a relationship.
At least once.
I've learned a lot about Obi-Wan today. More than I learned from watching Obi-Wan Kenobi on Disney. Which is kind of weird that you telling me things has maybe told me more about the character.
You learned about cutting meat in the desert.
That's true.
This drug dealer, as is always the case, has a name and a story attached to him in the universe.
And what might his name be? Is it cool?
Well, officially and in Legends continuity, which, if I haven't said it before, Legends continuity was the old expanded universe before Disney took over. All that's gone. None of that is real until Disney makes it real, or canon.
Yeah, now Simba's part of it.
Well, officially, his name is Elon Cel Sabagno. But Lucas, originally when naming the character, named him Elon Sleazebagano, or Sleazebagano. I'm not entirely sure what we're supposed to call it. I'm going to go with Elon Sleazebagano.
I want to go with that because it's just the purest example of George Lucas saying, what is this character? He's a sleazebag. What could we call him? Sleazebago, or what? Sleazebagano?
Sleazebagano.
Yeah, okay. Also, Elon Sleazebagano, that's the guy that bought Twitter, right?
The founder of Tesla, that's right. I think we brought him up on 2 podcasts in this series. We have 3 out. And we brought him up twice, which is funny.
That's disgusting. I don't even like that.
As Anakin searches the club, we see that Zam has seen Kenobi at the bar, and she's sneakily approaching and preparing to draw her gun. By the way, not changing her shape. She's still just Zam, so again, didn't make sense.
Not really taking advantage of... Also, that could have given her cover.
Exactly.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
That's why being a changeling was just haphazardly tossed in here.
Oh, she was born a changeling, is a changeling, forgot to use that ability.
There's a bit of a tension hook here, but just before she shoots Obi-Wan in the back, the Jedi draws his lightsaber and in one swift motion hacks off her hand with the gun still in it. He hoists her up and alongside Anakin drag her outside of the bar to question her. She reveals that she knew the target was a senator, but is hesitant to reveal who hired her. This causes Anakin to get that very shaky kind of mad where he yells, but his voice pitch is too high, so it's a little less intimidating than he means it to be. Sam sees no way out of this since she's being yelled at by a teenager, so she says, "It was a bounty hunter called..." But just then, a dart comes whistling in from the distance, hitting her in the throat and causing her to choke.
Ugh.
Obi-Wan and Anakin look up just in time to see Jango Fett fly off using his jetpack, and the Jedi can't do anything to stop him. Turning back to Zam, her face begins to shift and change into its natural reptilian face. Just before she dies, though, she gets in a good insult here. She says, "We shall eat Slimo."
Yeah.
Which is, of course, Bounty Hunter Slime Ball in translation.
She looks kind of like E.T. as she dies.
A little bit.
A little bit. I just like to say, this sort of bar fight where someone slashes somebody's hands off with a laser, shit's not going to happen if in Roadhouse. Tell you, right, there's a bouncer who would take care of that.
Well, when you got the best closer in the biz there, you don't have to worry about it.
Exactly.
Now, in Legends, Jango and Zam were actually good friends. Jango actually really hated to shoot her. But of course, he was forced to, lest she give him and his bosses up and all that.
To this movie's credit, I sensed that they got along.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think when he meets her, he's like very casual with her.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, it's Zam.
Very friendly.
And by the way, more on this later. Obi-Wan extracts the projectile Jango used to shoot Zam with, and he says it must be a toxic dart, so he just sticks it in his pants as evidence. Oh boy, Brian, it's time for more Jedi Council scenes.
Which are, especially these first 2 movies, man, are there a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. And we, of course, went through a bunch of these characters in our last episode, The Phantom Menace Part 2, but there have been some changes in the years since, so let's talk about a few of them. Eth Koth is gone. He's been replaced with Aegon Kolar. Now, here's the thing, I mentioned this last time. They had to get a different actor, so they meant for this to be the same character, but they looked too different. So after the fact, they just said, oh, it's a new guy, never mind. So that's really what happened here.
Maybe there was an election in there somewhere.
Stas Ali is here too, and this is another case of a recast, creating a new character. We didn't mention Adi Gallia last episode when we talked to Council, but she was a Thelothian female who's just a lady with a squid head, by the way. But not a squid head like Kit Fisto. This is a different kind of squid head.
Yeah, and in Star Wars, a lot of times that's the designation. What kind of rat man is he? That sort of question you'll find yourself asking.
This one's a 35% squid head. That's what I would go with.
Kit Fisto is more 50.
I'd go 80.
Okay.
He's pretty squid head.
I can be convinced of 80.
Well, the actress couldn't return for this movie, so they had a different actress play the role, which then morphed into Stas Ali, a different character. Shak Ti is here, and she's a pretty cool character. She's a Togrutan female, much like Ahsoka, who's the other famous character that's kind of come to light in recent years. She was in the Clone Wars, Anakin's Padawan. Shak Ti was known for having a good demeanor and getting along well with the clone forces. She's notable in this series because she dies about a dozen different ways. Lucas filmed several death scenes for her, and none of them made the cut in the movie. There's one where Anakin kills her. There's one where, Lord Vader kills her. There's one where General Grievous kills her. And then in the video game The Force Awakens, Starkiller, your character ends up killing her there. So there have been different ways she's died.
If I was her, I would want to like own a reel of all of my deaths consecutively. Right. It'd be pretty fun.
And, well, 2 of the times she just gets stabbed in the back with a lightsaber, Grievous and Anakin.
Yeah, the meanest way to kill someone.
And then finally, there's Coleman Trebor, and he's a dinosaur.
Yeah.
And also a very bad Jedi, as we'll see later on.
There are a lot of dinosaurs in the Star Wars universe.
Well, Coleman Trebor was inserted in the movie in place of Yariel Poof, who we went over last week.
Rest in peace.
Lucas decided to do that because he thought it might confuse audiences when we meet the Kaminoans later, who also have long, skinny necks with tiny heads.
Yeah, that's, again, kind of the danger when you make a bunch of these and you run out of all your aliens. Like, Lucas used so many aliens in the original trilogy between names and styles of alien that, yeah, it's a little harder by this point.
It happens. Obi-Wan and Anakin are apprising the Jedi Council about their findings with Zam the bounty hunter. The Jedis decide Kenobi needs to continue tracking the assassins and get to the bottom of it all, and Anakin needs to escort Padme alone.
They don't know that Anakin's a creep at this point. Clearly, no one's.
I think they know.
Like Yoda and Mace Windu need to be spending more time with him because they're trusting him in situations they shouldn't. Although you could also argue they're like, well, we're going to put you on security detail. Obi-Wan, you go do the brain work. You go do the investigative work.
You go be Columbo.
Yeah.
And we'll have him just be hired muscle.
Just one more thing.
He'll be escorting Padme back to Naboo, but Mace Windu tells him to use discreet transportation and to travel as refugees. Shockingly, Anakin is all for this. Who would have guessed? But he says it'll be impossible to convince Padme to leave, so Mace tells him to talk to Chancellor Palpatine about convincing Padme to leave the planet. So in Palpatine's office, he tells Anakin that Padme would never disobey an executive order, which he plans to push through the Senate.
Apparently, this happens in The Phantom Menace too, with Amidala and Palpatine, where Palpatine's like, let's we men figure out how to best manipulate this little girl. And part of that is because, this is a realistic power structure, but part of it's because honestly, Palpatine knows Amidala is one of his only threats in terms of her seeing through him at some point, potentially.
Do you think that he's really going to put this in writing? The Padme needs to be escorted home, or do you think it's an executive order is just, I'm an executive, here's my order? I'm curious if he does go to the Senate with this.
Yeah, because you would think he wouldn't want the paper trail for later, maybe.
Oh, I don't think he cares
of anything he's doing. Yeah, good point.
Because he just burns it all down.
Palpatine's not a subtle evil archvillain.
No. He is beaming with pride, however, the pride of an evil father. He gushes over Anakin saying, they finally gave you an assignment, huh, big guy? And in this scene, we're really starting to see that Anakin looks up to Palpatine.
Mm-hmm.
We heard some discussion earlier where the Padawan said he really trusts the Chancellor. And while Obi-Wan and Anakin bicker constantly, Anakin really does cherish what Palpatine has to say. So it's, again, pointing out that Anakin and Obi-Wan, the relationship is more brotherly, whereas Palpatine's the father figure. He's the one helping Anakin along the way.
And most importantly for Anakin's character, who's like a very defensive, effete man who cannot handle criticism and does not want to learn or grow, Palpatine is a yes man because he realizes that's what he needs to get Anakin to turn to the dark side, essentially, is I'll just tell him he's great in the face of what any Jedi are telling him.
Yes, so that way I'm the good guy.
Mm-hmm. He's always good cop, despite being very, and people say literally a lot, the worst guy.
Palpatine continues to brag about his stepson, and he says, I foresee you becoming the greatest Jedi and even more powerful than Master Yoda. Just so long as you never get all your limbs chopped off and left to burn to death on a volcano, that is. The way Palpatine giddily talks about Anakin, I was fully expecting him to turn around and have like a #1 dad t-shirt on.
Yeah, oh, that'd be great. Well, I mean, think about this. If you're Palpatine, this fell into your lap. How could the most powerful Force interactor of all time, essentially, also be a moron who you can easily manipulate?
And everyone's mean to him, so it's even easier.
Yeah, because no one will actually take the time to, train him. The only guy who's in charge of that is Obi-Wan, who I don't think this gets talked about enough, perhaps, with this series. Obi-Wan had to take on training Anakin, essentially, maybe even before he was ready to be a full-fledged Jedi himself. It's like he's taking on this role at a very young age. So, yeah, they are going to feel more like brothers, and Anakin's never going to see him the way he might have seen Qui-Gon.
And typically, when a Jedi finally ascends to knighthood, they do that for a while, then they get a Padawan. This was
Yeah.
instant.
Instant.
Because of the circumstances, but that's how it happened. And in the novelizations and everything, Obi-Wan talks about this. He's like, I'm not ready. He says in hindsight, after Darth Vader becomes Darth Vader, I wasn't ready. He knows it.
Yeah.
Everyone knows it. They're just letting it all happen.
And that's something I wish the movie spent more time with, like showing. Now, I do get enjoyment out of thinking about it because that is clearly implied. I can tell that as an older guy, but when I was a kid, I didn't see it as much.
Sure.
But that relationship's so interesting to me because it isn't that traditional of a mentor-mentee relationship as you might hear in Seinfeld. In fact, I find the relationship really interesting because later in other installments, we get a lot of, man, these guys were so close and then it grew bitter. No, we never really see them get along.
Right.
From minute one.
And before continuing his mission to investigate the assassination attempts on Padme, Obi-Wan is having a walk and talk with Mace Windu and Yoda. And again, you said it earlier, I'll point it out. Yoda doesn't actually have to walk anywhere. He's just hovering around on a floating chair. It's just like a half an egg, but
this
big enough.
This is a fucking Champions move here. Like everybody's walking halls and Yoda has like, it looks soft too, the inside of it. Has his own little floating pompous-on or something.
Well, Kenobi tells the other two Jedi he's not convinced Anakin's ready for this assignment because his abilities have made him, well, arrogant. Yoda pulls the boomer reaction, saying, his age when I was not so cocky was I. Now, what Yoda doesn't mention is when he was Anakin's age, his Jedi Masters would severely beat the Padawans whenever they didn't do what they wanted, and they all had to work in a coal mine making 15 cents a day.
I took this as a little bit of a dig at Obi-Wan, too, about his generation, about him questioning Yoda's assignment here, too, of putting Anakin into active duty, essentially, when Obi-Wan doesn't. But it's still the same thing as Yoda being like, only my generation did it right.
I'm the only one of my generation that's existed for 800 years, too, Yoda.
That's the other thing, is Yoda's generation was 100 generations ago.
Mace brings up the prophecy that we'll hear of for the first time in this movie, saying to remember that if it is true, Obi-Wan's apprentice is the one who could bring the Force back into balance. So don't sweat it too much. Surely it won't kill us all in a few years.
No. Just like all prophecies, which I'm including, like, you know, most religions in this boat, it does force everyone on the Jedi side to blindly think of Anakin in a way they might not otherwise, and maybe let him get away with more.
Well, next up, we have what's usually referred to as a very bad idea, because with Padme leaving, she needs to assign someone to take her position in the Galactic Senate. She decides the best person for that job is Jar Jar Binks.
All the people taking Padme's place in this series, let's go through them. Palpatine, Jar Jar Binks. These are not who you want in charge of anything.
I don't know. Jamila seems all right. Queen Jamila.
Yeah, sure.
After delegating her job, she storms back to Anakin saying she's pissed she has to leave and doesn't want to, considering she's been working for a year to defeat the creation of the Army of the Republic.
And say what you want about Padme and how her character seems inconsistent at times, but I really enjoy this version of her that actually is dedicated to a cause versus, for instance, Anakin, all the power in the world, his cause is me want now.
Yes. She stomps around and packs a bunch of fancy clothes and some suitcases while Anakin tries to calm her down. He says, Sometimes we have to swallow our pride and do what we're told, even though I could never, ever, ever do that.
And never have.
And never will. Padme marvels about Anakin having grown up. And
she does love bureaucracy.
And he talks about Kenobi being a good mentor to him, but he also immediately starts losing his mind. He goes on and on about Kenobi not letting him be a big boy.
This is wild.
I am truly thankful to be his apprentice. In some ways, a lot of ways, I'm really ahead of him. I'm ready for the trials, but he feels that I'm too unpredictable. He won't let me move on.
That must be frustrating.
It's worse. He's overly critical. He never listens. He doesn't understand. It's not fair.
All right, two things I want to talk about here. First off, the whole time Anakin's ranting, Padme's packing, and the look on her face and the way she's acting, it's literally just like, okay, honey, just barely listening.
It's so good that I want to give Natalie Portman like a Best Supporting Actress award for this movie because of how disinterested in Anakin she is for half of it. And I can't tell if that's Natalie Portman or if that's Padme. But, if you were to ask me, just hearing this, and maybe not if you were to take away the deepness of his voice, I would think Hayden Christensen was 8. I mean,
Yeah.
he does not sound like an adult man. He just sounds like a little kid here. And he also all he says is like, I'm glad for Obi-Wan, and immediately shit talks him.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I want to bring up is I mentioned the Stephen Glass movie earlier, Shattered Glass. Stephen Glass is a very Jewish New York man, and Christensen does the voice well. You hear a little bit in this. It's worse. Oh, he made me. Obi-Wan came to me and said, you can't use your lightsaber.
He says, you're the worst Jedi in Brooklyn. Oh.
And the dog told me to kill everyone in New York.
What's your favorite sandwich to get at the diner? You hit on another thing, though, which is Hayden Christensen. Even the accent is kind of inconsistent.
It is. Padme tells him that mentors often see more of our faults than we would like, but it's the only way we grow and become a better person. She says, Anakin, don't try and grow up too fast, putting a friendly hand on his shoulder. He stands, faces her, looking deeply in her eyes, and tells her, but I am grown up. You said it yourself. She says, please don't look at me like that. Shuts him down immediately.
Again, this is all really gratifying right now.
Oh, it very much is. And when he asks her why not, her tone changes and she says, it makes me feel uncomfortable.
And she says it in a way like she could have been in a horror movie. The line is read great, like there's a predator sitting right beside her.
To be honest, I have a feeling that Natalie Portman has said this exact line to a lot of men who have approached her
as
randomly.
Someone who became a prominent actor at such an early age, I'm sure she's only been saying that her whole life.
We see a Coruscant train landing, and aboard said train, I guess. We have Anakin, Obi-Wan, Padme, Captain Typho, and handmaiden/decoy Dorme. Dorme cries a whole bunch because she's worried about Padme, and we get to hear her speak here. I don't know what accent Rose Byrne was going with here. She's Australian, but it wasn't Australian.
No.
It was some pidgin version of Australian, British something, but it distracted me entirely from whatever she was saying. And I've heard this line 1,000 times.
That's the thing is I want to say for everyone involved, hey, just pick whatever you want. It's Star Wars. It's a fictional world. But like, I need to be able to hear what you're saying as an audience member.
And stay with the accent.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan tells Anakin not to do anything stupid and contact me or the council first. Oh, and may the Force be with you and all that. Anakin tells Padme it's time to go, and Padme blurts out, I know. And it's literally like they're already sick of each other. Well,
I wish that this had just been all different and they had been mortal enemies.
I mean, it's painted that way.
Yeah.
Or at least heading towards that way.
We're halfway through this trilogy almost, and at this point, yeah, it really is painted like that. It could break that way.
Padme and Anakin depart the train, and at this point, she tells Anakin she's suddenly worried, and he tells her it's his first assignment, so look, I'm nervous as well. But they say, don't worry, we have R2 with us, and they're right, because R2's the most competent character we've seen so far.
He can fix anything, too.
Now, Brian, I know to this point we've seen Natalie Portman, we've seen Keira Knightley, Ewan McGregor, Tamora Morrison, Rose Byrne, but what if I told you that we are yet to witness the hottest, sexiest, most charismatic person we see in the history of Star Wars?
I would tell you I know that you're correct because that's coming up.
It's coming up right now because in his quest to find out information, Obi-Wan knows that there's one person you turn to, one man whose daring life of excitement has taught him valuable information and knowledge, and that's Dexter Jettster.
Hell yes.
Jettster's a male basilisk, which is a monster with scales, big frog mouth. He's got 4 arms and an ass that won't quit.
It won't quit so much he's constantly having to pull up his space pants.
He owns a diner in the lower levels of Coruscant. It mostly serves workers in the area.
From the 1950s.
From the 50s, yes. And it's known as offering home-style meals, Jawa juice, and the best Nerf burgers you've ever had.
I'm a little concerned about Jawa juice and what it's comprised of.
Do you think it... Either way, I don't want it.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not drinking that, even though Obi-Wan's eager to. I'm also concerned about this waitress and how she is a robot programmed to be in the American United States 1950s in a space diner.
You want some Jawa juice, honey?
Yeah, whenever Obi-Wan arrives and asks for Dexter, she calls back to Dexter Jettster, who's of course on the line making the greasy spoon meals, and says, "Someone to see you here, honey," or something like that, in just a total I don't know, like 50s Jersey housewife accent.
And Dexter comes waddling out from his kitchen. He has a disgustingly dirty shirt, which doesn't cover his whole belly. Believe it or not, his mustache.
Which is very
He
bristly.
has a mustache as this.
He's
this
the 50s diner owner. Of course he does.
It's my favorite detail of all of this.
He and Watto both.
They both need cigars, too.
Yeah, I love that they give like these human accoutrements to these aliens. It's fun.
Well, the two friends embrace one another. Now, the beauty of having 4 arms is that you can hug a man and also pull up your pants at the same time.
I can't do that.
No, neither of us can.
Not without giving some sort of half-ass one-arm hug.
I was going to say something along the lines of, like, why don't you wear a belt? But he doesn't need to. He's got the extra arm.
Yeah, he can take care of that all the time if he wants to. Just have one hand down there. Plus, like, what on earth kind of belt does that guy wear? He's not built like anyone else in Star Wars, really.
No, it would... It's like an oval belt somehow. What a strangely shaped monster.
And it has to go below all of the arms.
So when he buys a shirt that fits, you know what? Do each of his arms have sleeves? It's like a short sleeve shirt. I don't recall.
I'm not
going to look
sure.
up a picture.
Yeah. I'll say this, though. His shirt's real dirty, too. Like, I mean, I guess he's been working all day. Dexter, though, is kind of ripped. You know, his arms, he looks like he lifts a lot of stuff all day long. All 4 of them. He's got a little bit of muscle tone.
You know, he's moving those Nerf boxes. And, oh, by the way, okay, so look. Nerf herder came about in Empire Strikes Back. It's what Leia calls Han. She calls him a scruffy-looking Nerf herder.
It's also one of the most popular kinds of foamy footballs.
It is probably the most popular. I'm going to confidently
I think
say
you're
that.
right.
When I was a kid, I thought she said nerve herder, like you hurt my nerves.
That makes a lot more sense.
It makes a lot
and
more
it's kind
sense.
of badass.
And I think people thought that too. I wasn't the only one, but in the years since, a nerf is like a giant cow. So a nerf herder would be calling them a farmer.
And that's why the burgers are made out of them, because,
Delicious.
you know, cows, we cannot be mad about eating those for now.
And Dexter Jettster has 4 holes in his shirt, 1 for each arm, and sleeves on each arm.
I think he's got more than 4 holes in his shirt. I just think those are the 4 that were designed in the shirt.
You know what? No, I'm going to take this back. At a different picture, from a different angle, he has 2 holes in his shirt. But kind of like, you know, guys who aren't fit but think they're fit will have a sleeveless shirt where the hole comes all the way down the side.
The slit is all the way down the side of the shirt.
It's kind of like that, and he has both arms poking through.
Yeah.
He's ripped, though. He can do this.
Yeah, he can pull that off. Like, I could see Dexter Jettster being one of those space guys who used to work out a lot and lift weights, so he's still got some muscle tone underneath there. But, you know, his body composition has changed since he bought this diner. He's on his feet, but he's not, you know, lifting weights anymore.
Well, he's got the knee injuries from playing high school football, which he talks about endlessly.
I know. And it's been less lately. I think it's because he's dating someone, but I'm not sure. But he seems happier. I'm
Might
glad.
be one of his waitresses. Who knows? Nuna ball, not football.
You know the football team you used to play for?
What's that?
The New York Jetsters.
We need to design that logo and put it on a shirt. I'll do it. That's amazing.
Please do that.
What is the Jets logo? I'm not a football guy.
Oh, we'll have to look it up. It's green. I know that.
Is it like it's
Like
like
a green and white. It's kind of old-timey looking is what I remember it looking like.
Well, the two friends squeeze into a booth at the diner, and Jettster asks the Jedi what it is he can do for him. Kenobi pulls out this dart that, of course, was used to kill Zam, and he asks the gourmet chef, because he is a gourmet chef.
Yeah.
Hands down. He chooses not to be in a fancy restaurant. This is his life. He owns this diner.
He's
by
not
choice.
chasing fame or Michelin star ratings. He is doing this for the love of the game.
Fit in the Star Wars universe.
Now, there's a guy built like Dexter Jettster.
Oh, yeah. Well, Jettster, of course, knows what this dart is. He lets out a hearty...
He's a fucking dart expert. What do you expect?
Well, what do you know? I ain't seen one of these babies since I was out prospecting on Sub-Terrell beyond the Outer Rim.
Darts and diners, the 2 Ds, my 2 passions. You want to Frisco him out or to know what your friend was shot by? That's so stupid.
Dexter continues saying it's a Kaminoan saber dart from the planet Kamino.
Sure.
Which is full of them cloners. Obi-Wan
So
wonders,
this is pretty common knowledge.
Yeah,
Kamino is a planet. It exists, and people on it clone.
I guess it's not common knowledge as we find out. Only Dexter Jettster knows about it.
It's just unbelievable to me that this space diner owner has this key information.
He's been around, man.
There are librarians out there who don't know about Kamino, as we'll find out later.
Obi-Wan wonders why this information didn't show up on the Jedi archives, or something along the lines of, like, why the droids at the archives didn't know. And Jettster goes on a rant about droids not being as good as obese, dirty, mustachioed monsters.
Yeah, because this is another boomer tendency.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, Lucas sure is cramming these in.
Because guess what Lucas probably is?
No, he's not. Believe it or not.
Really?
He's
That's great.
a progressive dude.
I assume, because he was born in the 50s, I
Yes.
think, and,
But Newt Gunray was named for Newt Gingrich, and he made him evil.
You know what? We have discussed that. That is true.
Lucas has a pretty good head on his shoulders as far as politics, I guess we'll say, or things along those lines. Where he falls apart is he doesn't know what it's like to be a human being.
Yeah, he's been wealthy so long. I've got to say this also. A lot of times I will prescribe, and this isn't to absolve filmmakers of like not paying attention to what they're doing, but I will prescribe meaning to something that doesn't have it, and it's just the guy making the movie or whoever making the movie adhering to kind of a genre trope.
Right.
So a lot of times I'll be like, wait, why is this person supposed to be a hero? And it's like, oh, they didn't think through that within the morals of their story, this person really wouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
But of course they didn't. They're like, well, this is what audiences react to.
Jettster tells Kenobi more about the Kaminoans, saying they keep to themselves, and when the Jedi asks if they're friendly or not, he says, well, that depends on how good your manners are or how big your pocketbook is.
And you said that just like he says it.
Very
with the pause.
creepily.
It's really eerie, and it made me think that Dexter Jettster would have an evil role later or something when I first saw it. He's implying that the Kaminoans want his money?
They're very money-hungry people.
I guess that's true. It just doesn't apply to Obi-Wan in this scenario because of his relationship to them. It made me think the plot was going to do a different thing when I saw this the first time.
And that's a good point, because when we meet them, we'll discuss this shortly, they're not mean, they're nice, they're just doing their role, and they have an agreement. They're considered curt, but they're not evil. This makes you think they're evil.
We see right away with the people on Kamino, they almost don't have personalities. Like, they almost seem neutral in a sense of, like, we have a job, we do the job, it's cloning.
That's actually a very prescient take, and throughout the Bad Batch and the Clone Wars show, we see a lot of them, because, of course, it takes place in that era, and they are that. They're mostly emotionless, or, for example, the Prime Minister treats the clones like nothing.
Yeah.
They're a commodity. Whereas we do actually find Lama Su, the one we meet a little bit later, she has a little bit of compassion when we see some of these side stories from the other shows. But you're very on point there with that. Obi-Wan decides to head back to the Jedi archives to check in on Kamino, but he can't seem to find information about the planet anywhere.
See, I was calling this Space Library.
That's about right. It's the Jedi archives.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Just pull this out of your ass. What would you name the librarian? Because I have her name here. I know who it is.
Okay, hear me out here. Libra, maybe.
That's good.
It sounds kind of like book,
yeah.
In Spanish or Latin. Libra Sleemness.
Sleemness is good. That's a Lucas name.
Yeah, Libra Sleemness.
I was thinking a little more literally along the lines of Sleaze Bagano, and it'd be like Libra reads a lot.
Book ladies
like
and...
like Bookman, but book lady.
Yeah.
Well, her real name in canon is Jocasta Nu. In-U.
That's pretty cool.
She's chief librarian of the archives and ancient ghoul. She tries to help Kenobi, but when no information...
I wouldn't say that.
Well, okay, no, your point taken. She yells at Kenobi. That's a better way to say it. She tells him it doesn't exist. It didn't pull up, so guess what? That's it. I'm so confident in my librarian skills. If it's not there, it doesn't exist.
Which is a bad attitude to have. You need to investigate this situation. Also, it was weird that Lori Beth Denbar was in the corner shushing everybody.
Wow. And then yelling because it's ironic.
Yeah.
It's a library.
Because you're not supposed to do that in a library. She just told everybody to be quiet, but she's yelling anyway.
So a little side note on Jocasta Nu. By the time Palpatine orchestrates Order 66 and they start killing all the Jedi, one of the Jedi that he was most afraid of was her, not because she's powerful or strong, because of her knowledge. She knows so much about the Jedi Order and the history and everything. So he sent Vader and the Grand Inquisitor, oh, I'm here to eliminate this librarian. And they do eliminate her, but she ends up hiding some information and data. Luke Skywalker finds it after Return of the Jedi, and that helps him start the new Jedi Order. So she was a big deal.
And there is something to be said for her character, even in her actions here, kind of replicating a real world thing of this person has plenty of factual knowledge.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, but is not using her fluid intelligence to maybe understand what is really going on.
Right. And the kid that comes up looking for her And the actor's name is Jet Lucas, son of George Lucas,
There we
adopted
go.
son of George Lucas. His character's name is Zet Jukasa. And don't worry, we'll see him murdered in the next
No,
movie.
is
It's
his
fine.
full real name Jettster Lucas?
What do you know, Dad?
Oh, I really didn't know you'd look and talk like him. Also, this was a mistake. You're going to eat me out of house and ranch.
Ranch. Skywalker Ranch, you bring it up again. On the refugee transport ship, Anakin and Padme are having a chat while Padme wears her most regal hobo clothes. She's draped in gold and ornate patterns.
Never wears a chicken suit in this movie.
Good for her. No, we see
Yeah.
a different lady in a chicken suit soon.
The other thing is they're trying to blend in here, right? They're essentially taking the train. Anakin's always blending in because Jedi clothes look just like hobo
Dirty.
clothes. Yeah.
Mhm. No, she doesn't, though. These nice, fine,
No.
patterned clothes. My girlfriend Katie hates that. We watched this movie together. She wanted to see it. She doesn't remember a whole lot about it. Because believe it or not, not as big a Star Wars fan as I am.
And she probably wouldn't be watching Attack of the Clones in her free time just all the time.
I recommend that people do. But no, she would not. But she couldn't get over this. She thought it was so crazy. Her hobo clothes were so shiny and nice.
It is pretty funny. And they have their own droid.
That's a good point. R2, in fact, collects some food and drops it off with the two of them. And Padme tells the Padawan that it must really suck not being able to do what you want as a Jedi. You can't visit the places you want. You can't do the things you want. Anakin adds, "Well, be with the people that I love."
Because every single conversation they have, Padme starts talking like a human, and Anakin redirects it toward, I would like to have sex. It's every conversation.
And he points those dopey eyes right at her.
Yeah. And points that dopey voice right at her.
Padme asks if he's even allowed to love, and Anakin explains that love itself is not expressly forbidden by the Jedi Code. Attachment and possession are forbidden. However, compassion, which Anakin says he would define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life.
These are the roughest parts for Hayden Christensen. Just like the passage you played earlier, if you give him what's almost tantamount to a mini monologue, it's just brutal.
Oh, it's really
so
bad.
slow. Something about the way he reads his lines.
And conceptually, it's basically you can have a fuck buddy if you're a Jedi. You just can't give a shit about him. That's the problem.
Yeah, you got to put your cigarette out and walk out the door in the morning.
So this is a key component to why the Jedi fail. They understand that, to be in the light side of the Force, well, there's so many layers to this. They understand that they need to allow a little bit of that love stuff, but they forbid true love. Part of the reason why Anakin is so fucked up is because they didn't allow him to care about his mother. If he would have had his mother, who he was attached to, be there and grow old and love in that manner, or maybe if they would have just let him love realistically Padme and openly, this may not have happened.
Yeah, you have to think that kind of restriction inhibits his ability to also, understand how other people think.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's cutting off that ability to make a deeper connection. And that's the one part of this where it's like, even Anakin here, he doesn't even know how to go about establishing that sort of connection with another person.
Padme tells him he's changed so much from the little boy who once tried to put the moves on her. So Anakin dials up the creep factor here. He tells her, "You haven't changed a bit. You're exactly the way I remember you in my dreams." He says as she nervously averts her gaze and eats her soup.
The soup's pretty good. I wanted her to redirect entirely like that.
Just how good is that soup? Well, you'll just have to wait until after the break to find out. Hey, old buddies, it's your pal Dexter Jettster. On today's episode of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Darts, we'll take a look at a delightful little bistro located right outside the shipping ports of Lothal, where they're serving up deep-fried colo clawfish with their claw and slaw sandwich. I used to get this to cure nasty hangovers back when I was busting heads for some spice miners on Garrel. Owner-proprietor Zieg Rog's a Tuscan raider with a taste for flavor when he's cooking single-file at his restaurant, the Frothy Rodian. You'll come hungry and leave happy. How happy? Well, that depends on how big your appetite is. So tell me, Zieg, what's the secret to a perfect claw and slaw?
Well, the first thing I like to do is you gotta kill them, because they taste a lot better, if they die really recently.
I've killed before myself.
And these babies are deep fried, am I right?
Oh, yeah, I just throw them in the fryer for a little bit, just sort of eyeball it till I think it's done.
Well, that's the claw. Now tell me about the slaw.
Yeah, you get some bread out, whatever, just kind of slather that coleslaw right on top of it. We just get it out of the tub. I tell them to refrigerate it, but it's whatever. We just get it at Sam's Club. It's really cheap.
Sounds like you got the makings of some good eating here, my friend.
Yeah, you just eat it after that. It's fine. I mean, it's not any better than anybody else's.
If you don't mind me saying, this dish is far out. Almost as far out as the time I was bootlegging Trandoshan ale to the outer rim. Those Chiss Ascendancy blowhards paid big coin for the good stuff. Well, what kind of darts you got round these parts?
Darts? This is like, you can't eat darts. Oh shit, man, I'm sorry. I didn't realize darts were like part of your show. It seems like not part of the restaurant stuff. Why? I don't know why you'd have that be part of your show.
Zeke's been serving up claw and slaw on level 1313 of the Coruscant Underground since his dad opened the diner, selling his signature human hair soup back in the year 20,253. Bounty hunters, scoundrels, and wayward Jedi only got good things to say about the Tusken signature dish.
If you ask me, they taste okay. Your claw and slaw will make a fine addition to my collection. I will deal with this delicious slime myself. It's not the worst Colo Claw I've ever had, but it isn't the best either.
Yep.
Yes, I was traveling with a man once who was shot with a dart. A very funny little dart, had marks on the side that gave it away. As it turns out, the droid that was also accompanying us was unable to identify the dart, and you know what I mean, you really just need to have a good dart guy around.
Well, that's it for this road trip, but don't worry, we got lots of joints to find all over the galaxy. So I'll be looking for you next time on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Darts.
Obi-Wan isn't quite convinced that this planet Dex told him about doesn't exist after meeting with the space librarian, so he's headed to the oldest creature in existence to see what he thinks, and that's of course Master Yoda. Yoda is currently teaching the younglings how to battle aggressive orbs while they wear dumb helmets.
Wait, why do you think they're dumb? They're so cool looking.
I'll tell you what they look like for viewers who've witnessed the new Obi-Wan Kenobi series. They look like the helmet that Fifth Brother wears, I believe is his number.
Totally, yeah.
It's just that flat, broad, it's a dumb helmet.
Okay,
Sorry.
fine, it's dumb.
Kenobi asks Yoda advice about Kamino, saying he's looking for information on the planet, but the archives contain nothing about it at all. Yoda takes this opportunity to completely roast Obi-Wan in front of the children.
Yep.
He says, "Lost a whole fucking planet, Master Obi-Wan has.
And also, since you can't figure it out, I wonder what massive brain power we can access to figure out what's happened here.
Yeah, the kids laugh. Yoda tells Liam, the youngling, to get the window shades, even though it would take Yoda no effort at all to do it.
Yeah, he's kind of hot-shotting around, though, Yoda, at this point.
Liam gets those shades, and everyone gathers around the map reader, which Obi-Wan places a small ball into, and a giant 3D map of the galaxy appears throughout the now dark room, thanks to Liam. He goes on to explain that gravity is pulling all the stars to a central point, yet the planet doesn't appear to be there. Yoda asks the kids what they think happened, and fucking Liam chimes right in, and he says, "Master, maybe Count Dooku erased it from the archive memory." Yoda giggles and says, "Truly wonderful the mind of a stupid child is."
Unbelievable you couldn't figure this out, Obi-Wan.
Liam's totally right, though. He tells him to go to the center of the gravity's pull, and you'll find the planet. Obi-Wan says, "Thanks, guys. Obviously my next step was to check out that area, but I mostly was just asking if you heard anything, or maybe there was just information I didn't know, but I'm so glad you came out to roast me for 20 minutes.
I mean, I really just was hoping there was like a phone number, so I didn't have to go there."
Yoda walks away from the kids alongside Obi-Wan and says he's going to meditate on this puzzle. Why, for this to be erased from the Jedi archives, that's a big deal. And it was Dooku, by the way. I'm making a joke. They don't know that yet, but that's who erased them. He's a master who had access. He did it.
This is, again, very consistent in Attack of the Clones, where the Jedi forces that be are just flummoxed by the idea of anyone cheating, essentially.
Doing anything that isn't the right thing.
Yeah, even though, I mean, well, we know they've been dealing with this for at least 10 years. It shouldn't be that shocking that there's like kind of a unified front against them that might be doing things that aren't above board.
Back arriving on Naboo, Padme, Anakin, and R2 ascend the stairs to the Naboo Royal Palace. And when I say that, I mean Anakin and Padme ascend the stairs. R2 has to stick out his little third leg and hoist himself up each stair, which takes forever.
Nobody's helping him.
And I guess he can't use his rocket boost yet. That comes later.
Yeah, they haven't installed it yet?
He kills a lot of droids in the next movie, so... His brethren, by the way, slaughters them without question.
He had to do what he had to do.
Padme talks about her time as queen and being asked to join the Senate by her royal replacement, and Anakin tells her he's glad she became senator, and the two head into the royal meeting, where we find the new queen, Jamila, alongside her old friend, C.O. Bibble. He's busy being dramatic, just like usual.
You won't believe this. He's concerned.
They're all discussing the impending civil war, and the queen asks if Padme thinks they could bring the planets who have joined the Separatists back into the Republic via democracy, but Padme isn't sure this is the case. Bibble gets nice and loud and says, "It's unthinkable! There hasn't been a war since the formation of the Republic." And then he continues, "But after 4 trials in the Supreme Court, my most reviled enemy, Newt Gunray, is still the Viceroy of the Trade Federation."
How? I mean, like, we just did a whole several hours talking about Newt Gunray doing everything that a person could possibly do to lose that job.
Charismatic, man.
I mean, I guess it was all legal, he did say.
See? That's it. That's how he's still here. You say it loud enough for long enough, people believe you. It's just like there's a trial. And the senator's like, "What do you say for yourself, Newt Gunray?" "It was illegal."
You know, counsel, he has a point.
Got me. C.O. Bibble continues to say he thinks the Senate is powerless to resolve the crisis. But the new queen knows that right now her best bet is to keep faith in the Republic. And anyway, there's a vampire with a soul patch here. He's got some stuff needs doing, so meeting adjourned. This guy was in the first movie, by the way. I just, for whatever reason, didn't bring him up. But he just has a soul patch.
Yeah, it's a space one. But yeah, he does have one. It's the facial hair of the future, or past.
Can you tell me what the ice cream of the future might be?
It's Dippin' Dots, obviously. Everything, the future just means smaller and more circular.
And worse.
And worse and harder. And you have to kind of chew it weird.
But you can get it out of a vending machine.
And you have to go to the mall, which I guess they still have those. I mean, they must.
I'm not going to a mall anytime soon.
You're not a teen. I don't think teens go anymore either, probably. I mean...
What, they skateboard around?
It seems like they don't... I don't think they go. They just are.
Finger on the pulse is what this podcast has. It's us knowing what the kids are up to.
Yeah, maybe we'll figure it out one day. We know what the younglings are up to. They're getting trained by Yoda.
I do really like the idea that there's a huge swath of just teenagers who think we're just fucking hilarious.
Yeah, we're like, oh, this podcast, man, I have it set to download the new one each week that it comes out.
I love these two old fuckers who are just sad all the time.
Also, one of my topics I'm most passionate about is Attack of the Clones.
I can't wait for those episodes.
Oh, man, I heard they're talking more about C.O. Bibble than usual this time.
As they all leave the room, Jamila says they need to think of Padme's safety, so C.O. Bibble, he invites himself along and asks Anakin, "What's your suggestion, Master Jedi?" But Padme shoots that right the fuck down. I love this,
too. Oh.
She goes, "Oh, no, he's not a Jedi. He's still getting a certification in Jedi. He's just a learner.
He's not a big boy yet. He's still wearing his diapers."
She begins to suggest her ideas for where to hide when Anakin butts in saying, hang on. I may be an apprentice Jedi, so I don't make the full wage yet, but I still am in charge of security." But Padme is Padme, so she says, "Fuck off. This is my home. I know where to go, you little idiot." So once again, everyone else here is really uncomfortable with these two arguing. They try to pretend it didn't happen and change the subject.
Again, Anakin's every line screams, "My dick is big!" It's just running around trying to prove he's important and strong.
If Anakin could buy a vehicle, he'd buy a Hummer.
Absolutely.
Obi-Wan Kenobi has since traveled to the location where his missing planet should be, and there it is.
Huh. So the little kid who on the first guess decided it must have just been erased was right.
Yeah, Okay. Liam, you mean?
Yeah.
Fucking
he was in the
Liam.
last movie.
It's him being a little boy. Master, what if it was erased from the Jedi archives? I knew I was here. Obi-Wan and R4, his trusty droid, who's pretty shit compared to R2.
I mean, he's fine.
Yeah, but compared to R2,
Compared to R2, yeah, what's he
other
do?
robots,
He
fine.
sits there and watches.
Well, they land his Delta 7 Ether Sprite class light interceptor, that's what it is, on a docking bay located on the planet Camino. It turns out is an aquatic planet that is almost entirely covered by water, and it rains nearly perpetually. This sounds awesome. Minus the covered in water. I like the rain.
I liked that too. It gave it kind of a noir planet feel a little bit.
I mean, we have this detective movie we're watching with Obi-Wan trying to figure out what's happening, so that adds to it.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. Wouldn't you rather this have been that?
Oh, yeah.
Like, add more to the mystery, get a little deeper in, and make it something you can really chew on, but have the movie just be, essentially, Obi-Wan Kenobi : space detective. I mean, I am
Disney Plus show I'm going to be watching.
Yeah, I'm 100% in on that, because that's the stuff that's a lot more interesting, because on the flip side, we're asked to believe some sort of romance that I'm not buying.
Bad romance, according to Bon Jovi.
Wait, didn't Lady Gaga do that also?
Are we going to just ignore that pronunciation?
Lady
Gaga.
Lady Gaga.
I appreciate it. She sounds like a Renaissance era mistress.
Yeah.
Lady Gaga, you don't go to her house. She has
all the best spells and potions.
Kenobi wanders into the nearest building, and conveniently, Ton Wei, who's a Kaminoan official, she greets him and tells him they expected to see him. I'm assuming there's something here that we missed where he radioed down and said, "Hey, I'm coming." Or did he just wander in and there happened to be the guide here who's like, "I know you. We know you were coming." I guess you could tell a Jedi, right?
Yeah, they have a certain look to them. Concerned, ethical, robed.
Kaminoans, by the way, are very tall, lanky aliens who look kind of like the traditional grays of our culture, but real stretched out. They're very lanky and tall. They're a pretty reclusive species, as you could have guessed, and again, good cloners, as Dex might say.
What a weird thing for your entire species to focus on. Cloning. Also, what else is on this planet?
This is about it.
Is there any restaurants? Or is it a pretty small planet, I guess?
I mean, it seems pretty big, but I think this is just it. It apparently didn't used to have water covering the whole surface. It used to be a normal planet with land surface. But something
so they
happened.
Probably had more room for like malls with teens in them.
Yeah, in diners. Yes.
Teen Kaminoans. What they just look the same?
Yeah.
But like
but they're
little
teenage.
and like with backwards hats.
And they still speak very slowly. Backwards hats. So they built these cities on stilts now, by the way. Obi-Wan's a little confused by them saying they're expecting him, so he says exactly that. I'm expected? Ton Wei tells him, of course. Come with me and you can meet our prime minister who's anxious to meet you after all these years.
Obi-Wan's yes-anding is pretty weak here.
A little bit,
I know that you would legitimately be surprised by each of these developments, but
hide it a little.
Hide it so you can get more information.
It turns out the prime minister's a huge fan of the original Star Wars movies, so he's familiar with Kenobi's work. He knows who he is. Obi-Wan's introduced to this prime minister, whose name is Lama Su, and they exchange pleasantries. Lama Su offers Obi-Wan a chair, or more appropriately, a giant illuminated ladle to sit down on. The alien tells Kenobi that he will be glad to hear that they are on schedule, 200,000 units ready, with 1 million more on the way.
That is a lot.
Those are big numbers. Obi-Wan, who's utterly befuddled by all of this, says that's good news? With a hearty shrug, Lama Su tells the Jedi to let his master, Sifo Dyas, know that the order will be met on time. Kenobi tells the lankiest prime minister ever to exist that unfortunately Jedi Master Sifo Dyas was killed almost 10 years ago. Oh shit, man, that sucks balls, says Lama Su. But he continues, I'm sure Sifo Dyas would be proud of the army we've built for him, or more appropriately, I'm sure Sifo Dyas would be proud of the army we built for him.
Prime Minister of Kamino does get a different little jacket.
He does. It's a little cooler. He's pretty evil when it comes down to it. We find out later.
Yeah, it seems like it, right? Even here.
When Kenobi finally questions this army, Lama Su says, oh yeah, it's fucking great. It's just this one guy, but over and over again, and he's pretty handsome. We learn that this Sifo Dyas, by the way, had this army created for the Republic many years ago, and a little more on this later. Lama Su says Kenobi must be anxious to inspect the units himself, to which Obi-Wan replies, that's why I'm here.
Right? If the people of Kamino kind of, I don't know, weren't sociopaths and could tell like how another person was emoting, they would be on to Obi-Wan just instantly here.
And you say the people of Kamino, what would you refer to them as?
Like walking around toothpicks.
Yeah, but their species name, you would call them...
Kaminoans, I guess?
I just want to make you say it.
It's so awkward.
Because you clearly went the other way, because I've done the same thing.
Yeah, because you want to say, like, Kaminoans.
Kaminoans.
Which sounds a little bit better.
Tough to do.
And the other thing is it's all fake, so it's like, I don't need to be respectful in any way, but I feel like I need to be. Like, I don't want to say the name of this fake species wrong.
I mean, they seem pretty nice, so I don't want to be mean to them.
I think they're named after a car.
Well, they all head off to see this grand Army of the Republic
that we've been hearing so much about.
Having convinced Anakin to listen to her, Padme and he arrive at the Lake Country, which is an area safe from would-be assassins. Padme waxes poetic about her childhood here. She says she used to love to swim this lake every day and has fond memories of those times. She lets out a hearty, "I love the water."
Boy, this place is just supposed to be inconspicuous, but it just looks like exactly where a retired queen would live,
yes.
Honestly.
And that "I love the water" line, I think we would talk about more as being read really badly, if not for what's about to happen.
Yeah, again, anything Natalie Portman does subpar in this movie, I don't notice because of how quickly it's countered by something worse.
Yes. After listening to Padme talk about how great and wonderful her childhood on the rich, beautiful planet of Naboo was, Anakin can think of no greater reply than...
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
We finally figured out his greatest weakness.
Yeah.
Sand.
It's weird how when Hayden Christensen was nominated for Best Actor at the Academy Awards in 2003, the year after this movie, that's the clip they chose to show the audience. You could see Anthony Hopkins clapping in the crowd, moved by what he'd seen.
So good, man. What a performance. The thing is, though, he's really not wrong. Sand sucks.
It does. I'm baffled at just the choice here, the music and everything to make this sort of the big, sweeping, this is where the romance between Anakin and Padme essentially blossoms from.
It really does, because to this point, she's been so against it, and you see the cracks start to appear at this point.
The sort of cracks that might appear on a countertop if you poured too much sand on top of it.
How much sand do you think that is? That seems like a lot of sand. Is this like a marble countertop?
Like 400 pounds of sand.
You know how we like to get to the bottom of jokes?
Yeah. Oh, that's the best way to do it. Well, because some of those materials are more porous.
Sure.
The sand gets in there, and it causes the pores to expand of the countertop.
Cracks your hourglass or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Anakin continues, "It's not like that here, though. Everything here is soft and smooth." And as he says this, he begins pawing at Padme.
Yeah, I put wiping his hands on Padme.
He also stares deeply into her eyes, and the two just keep staring at one another. Eventually, Anakin leans in and just starts kissing Padme, and guess what? She reciprocates. She takes it and gives it right back.
What a disappointment here. Because again, this is not technically foreshadowed in terms of how the characters interact with one another. I should want these two people to be together.
Well, you don't,
and
right?
I don't,
no.
Because I see him as very predatory, and I see her as apparently naive.
Unfortunately, though, just when it starts to get hot and heavy, Padme pulls back and says, "I shouldn't have done that.
I hate you."
Anakin, in the middle of having the hardest boner he's ever had in his life, he has the air sucked right out of him with this gut punch, and he offers up only a feeble, I'm sorry. I'm
better than Obi-Wan."
Obi-Wan is now inspecting the cloning operation, and Lama Su is explaining about them. He says they are far superior to droids in that they can, of course, think creatively. Su says he takes great pride in their combat education and training programs, and Obi-Wan asks about their growth acceleration, which they mentioned off screen. It turns out they grow rapidly, which gets them to a fighting age much quicker, but also on the downside, it means that they'll essentially die much quicker as well. We do get shots of young clones. They're played by actor Daniel Logan.
All of them.
As well as older clones played by Tamora Morrison.
All of them.
Again, more on these guys in a bit. Lama Su continues saying the clones are totally obedient thanks to genetic modification, and they'll take orders without question. He mentions them being far less independent than the original host. And
suckers.
At this, Obi-Wan asks just exactly who was the original host.
Yeah, probably somebody badass who does not listen to direction.
A real rebel, real skateboarder.
Yeah.
Su tells him it was a bounty hunter called Jango Fett, and when Kenobi asks where Jango is, Lama Su says, "Oh, we keep him here.
We give him like a little room with a cot. I mean, that's his repayment for being the blueprint for an army.
And it sounds like they're saying it like he's a bird that somebody forgot to feed today.
Yeah.
That's just in a back room.
So why do they keep him there? They've got his material, right? Like,
yes,
presumably he blooped in a cup and they have it.
Well, the genetic material degrades. And we actually
Oh.
find this out in the Bad Batch show because it turns out most of the clones are diluted versions of him. The DNA isn't pure. They say there's one remaining pure person left, Boba, but that's not what they're talking about.
Yeah.
They're talking about this little girl named Omega who's obnoxious, and she is an exact clone of Jango, and she's very young, so she's part of that show. But anyway, that's mostly what it is they know that eventually they're going to run out of the pure DNA,
Okay.
and that could cause problems.
So they got to keep him. Now, for me, if I'm him, I'm like, well, this kind of sucks. Like, Kamino, what is there to do here but clone?
Apparently make up your own languages with your son.
Yeah, that's true.
Son in quotations.
Designer son.
Of course, aside from the considerable pay which Jango receives, he also asks for one thing. We've been joking about it. An unaltered clone.
Yeah, sweet little Best Buy kid.
This is kind of weird and honestly a bit pretentious, I think, but oh well. This young clone does not have the age acceleration that the others do, and his personality has not been altered in any way. So it really is a genetic clone of Jango Fett, but young at this point.
Now, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
If someone tells you, you have to have a kid, one way or another, this kid's just going to materialize. It can just be a kid, or it can be a clone of you.
Kid.
I'm just taking the kid.
No,
I know how this turns out.
I know what this is. I don't want that person to experience this.
No. This person, the kind of person this person would turn out to be is a person that talks about Attack of the Clones for hours on end.
So many. We've dedicated a night to this shit. 2 nights
This
at
is
least.
part 1.
Kenobi tells the Kaminoans. Kenobi tells the people who are from Kamino.
See?
So
You
much
taste
easier.
your own cocoa claw or whatever.
He tells them he'd like to meet Jango and get his autograph. So Tanwi says, yeah, I'll be happy to arrange it for you. Okay.
Yeah, I can't pick up on verbal cues, sure.
It's time for more romance, Brian. Are you ready for this?
Ugh.
Anakin and Padme are hanging out in some beautiful Naboo field, and Anakin is pressing Padme to talk about an ex-boyfriend, which is a little weird, too.
So, like, they're talking about first kisses and
Yeah.
things like that, but this is, like, years and years ago, so, like, why, you'd be fine with it.
You wouldn't get real whiny and upset, would you?
No, you wouldn't think so.
You do.
Oh.
Oh, and by the way, I'll keep going about the plot here, but in the Clone Wars show, there's an arc where an old fling of Padme's comes back. He's on the planet Mandalore. He's a big deal there.
Oh.
They're trying to do diplomacy through him, he and Padme, and Anakin does not care
I
for
bet.
this, and he beats him up.
Because that's who Anakin is. I mean, he is just... We don't ever see him really be anybody likable. I know I keep beating this drum, but he's kind of a villain from moment one.
Mm-hmm. Which is why if we didn't have Obi-Wan, this movie would be
Doesn't
unwatchable.
work at all.
Entirely unwatchable.
Yeah. Especially considering the Jedi Council's not likable. They're
Right.
actively kind of saying, oh, don't worry, let's not do anything. It's really only Obi-Wan who's kind of on the job.
Padme talks about this ex-boyfriend, and Anakin gets snippy, asking what happened to him. She says she went into public service, and he became an artist.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a sandwich artist. We don't know.
We have no way of knowing.
An artist nonetheless.
Also, it could be Picasso. We don't really know how this works in terms of how it overlaps with our sense of time.
Anakin says that the guy getting out and becoming an artist is the smart one, and Padme says, well, look, you really don't like politicians,
Well, like
do
2
you?
or 3.
Yeah, 2 or 3. One I'm not sure about. Eventually, she asks him how he thinks the Republic should work, and he says that thing that people who don't understand anything about politics say, which is people should sit in a room, discuss what's in the best interest of the people, then enact it.
As if that's not essentially a boiled down version of what we are doing.
Exactly. Padme tells him that is what they're doing right now. The problem is it's hard to get people to agree. And the real problem for the Galactic Republic is the corruption. They've got people selling votes and all that stuff. That's where their big flaw comes into play.
Because then good people start believing lies, and when that happens, it's difficult.
Anakin's response to all this is just to say, well, they should be made to agree. So Padme says, that sounds an awful lot like a dictatorship, to which Anakin says, hey, if it works, with a little grin on his face. Well, she smiles back and says, come on, you're making fun of me, aren't you? So Anakin snickers a bit, and he says, no, I'd be much too frightened to tease a senator. And it's at this moment that Mitch McConnell felt himself begin to blush.
Yeah, he felt a moving nestling in his loins.
Oh, Anakin.
Because again, this is Anakin essentially saying this evil stuff he really believes.
But
Padme
cutesy.
being like, okay, you pulled my leg, and then Anakin be like, oh, she thinks I'm joking. Yeah, I'm totally joking. I don't want to take over the world and just have me be the only person who gets anything from it.
The scene shifts and Padme begins to Sound of Music scamper across the scenic green landscape. And by the way, that's precisely what this is an homage to. She's spinning in this green field. Yeah. Lucas put that in for that reason.
I totally believe that, yeah.
Anakin is seen riding this giant cow-sized tick like a surfboard, which is about the coolest thing I think he's ever done or does.
Yeah.
I don't know. The Rogue One hallway scene's pretty cool, but evil.
And I still attribute that one more. This is a distinction. Darth Vader does that.
Okay, so they're different in your mind.
But they aren't. This is just the wussy version of Darth Vader stuff, you know? That's that's what he's doing in this movie.
Yeah, okay.
This is baby Darth Vader shit. This is baby Vader.
Anakin falls off of the tick thing, though, and it tramples him briefly, so Padme runs to him, terrified that he's hurt. He's just fucking around with her again, though. He's totally fine.
And this made me mad, too. Everything about Anakin,
that's a shit thing
his
to do.
sense of humor is pretend I'm hurt to worry someone, and then they'll be relieved when I'm not hurt. That's not funny. It's just, like, childish.
But it works.
It does work. So in my notes, I'll mainly have little points I might want to make if the situation arises. But to set the scene, I like to have kind of plot stuff, too. So I wrapped this up as, Anakin falls off, big dumb fat animal. He's okay, but pretends he's not. This movie's bad. That's just that little, I don't know why, but this did it for me. This was another one of those points where I was like,
I'm confused. Did you lift that from the screenplay? Those are stage directions, right?
This is how Lucas wrote it.
1 week before it started filming.
Yeah.
The two giggle, they roll around in the grass for a bit. And back on Kamino, Obi-Wan has been brought to Jango Fett's college dorm room, and a young clone boy answers the door. Ton Wei calls this little boy Boba, asking for his father.
Now, is there something we're supposed to pick up? Oh, it's Boba Fett. Okay. Yeah. Did anyone know he was a clone before this movie?
This is a completely fabricated at this spot.
Okay, I thought so.
So let's get on that then. Obviously, Boba Fett debuted in The Empire Strikes Back.
Was not really a character.
Not really. He had like 3 lines, but he looked fucking cool.
Yeah.
It's the first time anybody's seen him.
And that's why everybody just latched onto him.
I was the same way when I was a kid. I like the character now, actually, for the way they fleshed it out and the things they've done. But yeah, no, no matter what, he looks really cool. The visor, the T of his eyes. Oh, man. Anyway, what do you think about that kind of a retcon? Making him a clone? It's not a retcon, but decision-making.
It doesn't really bother me. I think it would bother me if it was done for a character that we had a whole backstory for already. Okay. And that was added on unplanned. But with Boba being essentially intended as more of like a side character who, you know, certainly I think when they made Star Wars, when they made the original trilogy, nobody was thinking at the outset, we're going to sell a lot of Boba Fett toys.
Yeah.
You know, but so yeah, I don't mind it with him.
I really don't mind it either. I agree. Shoehorning it in seems kind of weird.
Yeah.
But once I get past that, the actual concept of him being a clone and all that, fine. It's cool.
I do wonder what it adds for them, like what other than it being kind of like, oh, I didn't think of that. What it adds to the story for Boba to be a clone. Is there him being a clone without the accelerated aging? Is there anything that would have, like, is he going to live longer or anything like that?
No. Here's what I'll say is it does immediately when we find out Jango Fett's the dad, you go, oh, Jango Fett's good. Like, as in he's good at what he does because we know Boba's the best.
That's true, yeah.
Okay, therefore. So I think that is maybe one thing that they could have pushed from it. But it also, I don't know, it just kind of gets the character in the movie. It's just a thing. I've no qualms about it either way, I guess.
And for all we know, like, Jango also, like, he might not be able to have kids.
It's true. Maybe he's got a low midi-chlorian count. Yeah, we don't know.
Wait.
So the young clones, and thus Boba, again, they're played by Kiwi actor Daniel Logan. To talk about him a little bit, he was featured in some commercials in New Zealand. That's how he got his start. Apparently, he played rugby or something, because they all do down there. It sounds so racist the way I say it like that.
They all play rugby with penguins down there.
Well, apparently he auditioned for a commercial, his whole rugby team. The director liked him, made him the focus. He got pushed in some mud. Anyway, then he did a couple more commercials, a local show, got in this movie. The other thing I want to point out that he's been in is a guest appearance on an episode of Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, because they filmed that show in New Zealand.
Now, who's he play on that? Boba Fett?
Yes, Boba Fett and Hercules, The Legendary Journeys. That's where Boba Fett and Hercules have to battle, and unfortunately, Hercules gets roasted with his flame.
What a crossover. The ratings they did for that thing.
So I bring this up for a couple reasons. A, that's awesome. B, we have another show on the Bootu Inc. podcast network. It's called the Bootu Boys.
Yeah, we do.
Brian and I do this alongside our friend Spencer, and we cover old TV shows and even some new TV shows in the exact way we're covering Star Wars. Here, go check it out. We even did Hercules.
We did, although, with no Boba Fett's in it.
No, we didn't have that episode. Instead, we had Bruce Campbell.
And Centaurs.
And Cleopatra.
Yes.
So go check out that show, Bootu Boys, available wherever you get your podcasts. How old would you guess Daniel Logan was when filming the scene?
Kid age guessing is really tough. So,
yeah, for us who don't have kids.
9.
Okay, that's what I'd say.
Okay.
7, 8, 9.
How old is
10.
he, like 23?
He's 15 years old.
Wow.
I would not think that was a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah, there's no way.
Eventually, Jango makes his way into the living room to greet Kenobi, and Ton Wei introduces the two, saying Kenobi has come to check on the progress of the clones. Now, first off, Jango is played by New Zealand actor Timur Morrison. He has since reprised that role as adult Boba Fett and as a clone in 3 Disney Plus series.
That he
I love it.
Got that role,
and
they didn't give it to, like, I don't know, Pete Davidson.
You made it very worse. Those shows are The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and most recently, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I find him utterly charming.
I do too.
I think he's any interview you listen to this guy, even back then, if you watch the behind the scenes stuff, he's just charming as hell. And he, in fact, told Daniel Logan, who plays his son in this, he said, "While we're on set, you call me Dad, and I'll call you son, and we'll grow to love each other." And then, so they did. Like, legit.
That's awesome.
Even when they weren't recording, it was dad and son, that sort of thing.
He's really good at the, like, tough guy with a little twinkle in his eye thing.
Absolutely. So I love him coming back, kind of like you said, and I believe he'll be reprising the role going forward whenever it comes up. So maybe we get a second season of Boba Fett. Maybe
I'd imagine we do, unless they turn it all into one thing, which they could do if they wanted.
And I do think, and who knows, we may cover this on a bonus episode.
Yeah, we might.
I do think what happened with the Book of Boba Fett was they realized they only had 2 episodes worth of Mandalorian stuff and a lot of Boba stuff, so they said, well, let's just give him a show. I don't mind it, but I understand when people are like, where was Boba in this episode?
Yeah, for me, it's one of those things like, I guess my expectations of Star Wars are such that it can't bother me. Because it's like, what I'm mad about is the name. It's all in the same universe, so I can't really be angry.
Jango enters the scene. He's rolling down his sleeves like he just finished doing the dishes. And Brian, are you ready for some fun George Lucas dialogue?
I absolutely am.
I know I am too. So here's a little bit of an interaction between Kenobi and Fett.
Your clones are very impressive. You must be very proud.
I'm just a simple man trying to make my way in the universe.
Ever made your way as far into the interior as Coruscant?
Once or twice.
Recently?
Possibly.
Okay, let me get this out there. That was not altered. That is straight dialogue from the movie. I didn't clip silences.
No.
I didn't adjust. That's a conversation 2 adult men had with one another, and they're not having the same conversation. They're talking at different people, is what it seems like.
They don't seem to be either one I shouldn't say this. Obi-Wan is doing what you'd expect. He's asking probing questions to get at an answer. Jango is making himself seem like a criminal.
Absolutely.
And
he's not hiding anything.
It is not necessary.
And I understand there's supposed to be a lot of tension here because Kenobi absolutely realizes this is the assassin.
Yeah,
this is the guy.
Do you think this is, like, George Lucas thinks this is like, again, I mentioned this earlier about Camino, but like a noir scene where the detective's interviewing a guy and he's like, so where were you on the night of the first? And the bad guy's like, I might have been there, maybe not.
Okay, yeah.
But it's not played that way.
No.
It's just kind of like, why are you making yourself seem guilty?
I'm just a guy trying to make my way through the universe. That was more D. Bradley Baker doing a clone on the Clone Wars show because for the cartoon, they didn't have Timur Morrison. He's got a more gruff, straight voice. D. Bradley Baker, who was a white dude doing the voice of a New Zealander, it's close, but it's not quite there.
It's still not the same. It's the original deal, which is one of the Tamura Morrison's nicknames. The original deal, I've decided.
I can only imagine, by the way, while this is going on, that Ton Wei must just think human interactions are bizarre.
Yeah.
If this is what you're seeing.
Or not be picking up on any of the subtext again and be like, maybe, I don't know.
By the way, this keeps going. That wasn't the end of it. Jango at one point speaks to Boba in a different language, and I looked it up. It turns out this is called Fett code in lore. It's literally just a code they taught each other so that they could communicate if they were in trouble. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Imagine if you and your dad had a code.
No. No, I really couldn't imagine that.
No one knows your dad who's listening to this. Well, maybe one or two, but wow, if they did. After he talks to Boba with this language, Boba goes and shuts the bedroom door in just the most obvious manner possible while the Jedi and Jango continue to chat. And Jango does a little subtle thing where he walks to the other side of the room to change the eye line, but it's kind of still obvious. Kenobi questions the bounty hunter about Jedi Master Sifo Dyas, who, as we've recently learned, commissioned for the creation of the clones from the Kaminoans. But Jango says he's never heard of him. In fact, he was hired by a man named Tyrannus on one of the moons of Bogdan.
I was hired by the guy with the most evil name, Tyrannus.
Kenobi finds this curious. After a weird silence, the two continue talking while standing very close to one another, and Kenobi thanks Jango for his time, to which the bounty hunter replies, "Always a pleasure to meet a Jedi." Once Obi-Wan leaves, Jango tells Boba to pack his things. They're leaving. So, okay, stuff to talk about here.
Yes.
Let's talk about hired by a man named Tyrannus, blah, blah, blah.
Please.
First off, Tyrannus is Darth Tyrannus, Count Dooku. That's his Sith name. Darth Sidious is Emperor Palpatine's name. Darth
Because,
Vader,
again, they are not beating around the bush when it comes to just sounding dead-ass evil.
I was kind of hoping I would save this for the Revenge of the Sith episode, because when he's named Darth Vader, I'll talk about how the Force does it, but essentially the dark side of the Force speaks to the people then. That's where the name comes from. And maybe that's why it's always so stupid.
I assumed there was some sort of like devil dictionary or like darktionary maybe that the dark side used to come up with these names.
That's pretty much right.
But I guess it kind of just puts them in their head.
10 years prior to this movie, Dooku had the falling out with the Jedi Order. Basically, Qui-Gon Jinn was his apprentice. Jinn is killed by Darth Maul. And the council that up to that death was the Sith couldn't be back.
Right.
And Dooku had also grown a little tired of the way they were letting the Republic turn into crap. So he left the Order and was not thrilled with it. And that's a big deal. No one does that. He became a Count again. He got his money back.
But in spite of this, no one thought he might have like tampered with the system and erased Kamino or anything like that.
Oh, and by the way,
or tried to assassinate Amidala.
Jocasta Nu, the librarian, apparently she and Dooku had a little bit of a thing for one
another.
So then after Dooku leaves the Order, eventually he's approached by Palpatine, who convinces him to become a Sith. This is where it's a little different than, say, Darth Maul or Darth Vader or some of the other Darths who become Siths, because Dooku's eyes never change. You notice all Sith get the yellow eyes, the scary eyes. The reason being is...
Too tall.
Too tall. Once you pass 6'3", can't do that.
6'5", by the way. I looked it up. Christopher Lee.
That's a big boy. It's bigger than me. And I'm
big old boy. You're less Dracula-like, though.
A little. Essentially, he does go to the dark side, and he becomes a Sith, obviously, and he's a bad guy in a lot of senses of the word, but he's very much doing it in his mind for the right reasons.
Yeah,
and I guess you could argue
our next episode, part 2 of this, we'll definitely be discussing that.
Yes.
Because we get, well, first off, Count Dooku appears on screen as Christopher Lee, and he does get in a little bit into his like philosophy behind his actions.
Yes. So essentially, he never really became truly evil Sith. And that's why his eyes didn't change. But he does use the dark side. So as for the actual hiring that Dooku did of Jango Fett to be the clone template, we get to experience that whole story in the 2002 action-adventure video game Star Wars Bounty Hunter, which was released for PlayStation 2 and Nintendo GameCube. And honestly, this game's great. I played it back then. I've played it a little bit within the last couple of years. It's a lot of fun. Basically, you control Jango and are hired by this mysterious Tyrannus to fulfill increasingly difficult bounties. And eventually, you beat both another Mandalorian warrior as well as a former Sith apprentice. I believe it was Palpatine or maybe Dooku's training apprentice or whatever. And upon doing so, Dooku comes out as Tyrannus and reveals this was all a test so that he could find a warrior who was good enough to be the clone template. So again, Mandalorians are like the enemies of the Jedi that don't use the Force. So this is what they were looking for, because obviously when Palpatine started initiating this clone army, he was going to kill the Jedi with it anyway. So we need somebody who can do that.
And who better to do it than people designed to do it.
Also in that game, that's where we see Jango forge a friendship with Zam Wesell from earlier in the movie. So it really did bother him that he had to kill her. They were friends by this point.
Yeah. And that, the actors play that out pretty well, I thought. In their very limited time together, they seem very familiar with one another.
All right, cool backstory stuff out of the way. It's time for some Lucas-style romance.
You started that sentence with cool, so I didn't think we would end up going back to Naboo here.
That sentence cratered at one point. Anakin and Padme are having dinner on Naboo, and by dinner, I mean they're each preparing to eat one pear using a knife and fork. But before Padme can dig into her delicious single pear, Anakin steals it from her plate using the Force, and oh my god, I just realized exactly what I would do if I had the Force. It would just be for food, to steal food from plates. That's it. That's all I would use.
That's a pretty good power. Although here, doesn't it just once again seem like Anakin's acting as a small boy? I like a girl, so I'll pick on her. You know what I'm talking about? Like a fifth grader pulling a girl's hair.
Stealing her pear and cutting it for her. Because, that's how you eat pears. You just chop them up, meet them with a fork and knife. And they're CGI pears, so when they cut them, there's no resistance to the knife. It looks so bad.
Unnecessary.
Yeah.
Just have it be a pear, right?
Now, in case you aren't aware, Brian, Padme's big kink is being fed fruit by a man from a pretty fair distance away.
It is in lore she's into pear play.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing.
She gets worked right up with this. The two retire to a room with two love seats facing one another.
I really quick have to add one thing we didn't mention, which is after he does his pear trick, Anakin does, and Padme does like it. She's charmed. He then goes, Obi-Wan hates it when I do stuff like this. Like, just so often shoehorning in that he hates Obi-Wan. Part of his romance is tied up with his dislike of Obi-Wan.
But also, are you feeding a lot of people with the Force and pears?
Has this happened before? Was he trying to give Windu an apple and Obi-Wan got pissed?
That's just as hot as Padme.
Yeah.
Well, they're in that room with the two love seats facing one another. There's a hearth there, a nice fire roaring. And Anakin chooses to spoil this mood by opening his dumb mouth.
Ugh.
He says, "From the moment I met you all those years ago, not a day has gone by when I haven't thought of you." He continues saying things about how he can't control his 19-year-old boy urges, and the whole time she remains very silent. He says, "I'm haunted by the kiss you should never have given me."
This is your fault, too. Everything is someone else's fault.
Man, I don't know, Lucas. This is kind of genius when you think back about it. This guy was just awful, and he uses the verbiage that proves it, even when he means well.
Every step of the way. If they had framed this as Anakin's a villain from day one, I think this series is different.
After more and more silence, he gets frustrated and asks if she's suffering as much as he is, and if so, please tell me. A, she's not. B, she shakes her head and says, we can't. It's just not possible. She tells him to think about it. No matter how they feel, he's a baby Jedi and she's a galactic senator. If you follow your thoughts through to conclusion, it'll take them to a place they cannot go. His response to all this logic is, so you do feel something for me.
Oh my God. And again, just kind of like, all the time he's a crying baby that someone goes, there, pats on the back, and then he's back to square one. Until he eventually becomes an evil Darth Vader type.
Eventually, he reveals that his master plan to solve all of their problems is, let's just not tell anyone. She says, no way, man, I can't live like that. And he finally agrees, though obviously he's just biding his time at this point. Okay, we'll drop it, so we'll get into it later.
No, I wouldn't. One thing about me, Anakin Skywalker, is I wouldn't want to be unethical here.
Next, Tanwi is seeing Kenobi off, and she reminds him to tell his masters just how cool these clones are. And if they require more troops, remember, it'll take time to grow them, much like a pepper plant. Not at all like a magic grow capsule, which you put in the water and it turns into a dinosaur.
No,
it's
which
not like
we've
that.
been talking about a lot lately, and I'm liking that memory flooding back. She also manages to say something to Obi-Wan like, oh, and you could say like a sarcastic retort to me right now, and I wouldn't pick up on it.
Kenobi thanks her and heads back out into the rain to his ship. But before he leaves, he decides that rather than send a text message to the Jedi Council from the comfort of his warm, dry spaceship, he's going to stand out in the pouring rain and FaceTime them instead.
Yep.
He asks R4 to scramble a video message to the old folks' home, which I adore. I love that is just
rules.
Tossed in.
That rules.
I picture all the Jedis just like elbowing each other. Hey, we're at the old folks' home, huh? We're so old.
Or what if like that's how he has his little FaceTime thing programmed, and it's like a fucking dig on them, and they don't know about it?
Okay, so you program your Amazon, you-know-who, to respond to the cue of the old folks' home.
Yeah,
it does.
So it's like having a guy you work with in your phone is like, dumb asshole. And then like you tell your phone like, hey, call dumb asshole.
Do you think Yoda hates or loves that nickname?
I think Yoda would get a little chuckle out of it. He likes pranks.
Yeah, particularly much like 20 years from now.
Yeah,
really
then
like
he
some
loves pranks.
Mundi, on the other hand, probably thinks it's just rude and he just doesn't understand
Yeah,
gentle
he's a
prodding.
hard ass about this kind of stuff.
He's got those 2 brains and that big old penis head. And he gets to fuck. We know this.
I guess we technically do know this. With his brains? Or
Well, I mean, the brain is the most erogenous zone
That's
of the
true.
body,
And
my friend.
he's got multiples.
Twice the fun. That's twice the fun. What about the fucking of the Wookiees? Yoda and
Chris
Mace...
Stanton after dark.
Yoda and Mace Windu both happen to be on the toilet at the same time, sitting next to one another. So Kenobi's hologram pops right up in front of them. Obi-Wan updates the 2 Jedi Masters on the clone situation, and at one point, Windu asks him if he thinks the clones are involved in the assassination plot or not, and Kenobi says, no, they seem to be pretty innocent in that regard. Of course, upon hearing this, Yoda tells him not to assume anything and have a clear mind, which is pretty shitty considering Kenobi wasn't, like, snotty about it. He was just saying, someone asked him his opinion, and he was like, well, here's what I think. Not, like, this is what it is.
Yoda, I'm telling you, like, everybody's just like, Anakin's fine. Shut up, Obi-Wan. Like, any of your suspicions are unfounded. But this is what all of this shakes up the Jedi Order.
Right around year 882 of life, that's when you start getting complacent. Kenobi brings up Sifo Dyas and asks if any of this clone army stuff was authorized by the Council, but Mace says, nope, this was all done in secret. So Yoda tells Mace to clear his mind and not assume anything, because if you do that... I'm kidding. The Jedi Masters tell Kenobi to bring Jango Fett in so they can question him, and Obi-Wan tells them he'll report back once he has the bounty hunter in custody. This, of course, ends his phone call. Yoda says we're just straight up fucking blind if we didn't see this shit going down this whole time, and Mace admits it's probably time to tell the Senate that the Jedi's ability to use the Force has diminished. Yoda cautions against this, saying only the Sith know about this, and if more people knew, suddenly we'd have more enemies.
Yeah, and now's the first time where Yoda at least reveals, he may have suspected it before, though, that things are way more corrupt and worse than a lot of people originally envisioned. And I like that now the audience is more privy to that. Hey, there's corruption from the inside, and these guys no longer look like morons ignoring it.
Well, and to Yoda's credit, multiple times throughout the show when Mace or Mundi's like, no, it couldn't be that way, like Dooku earlier in the movie.
Yes.
Like, he's an idealist. He wouldn't do that. Yoda's not quite ready to commit.
No, and he is not that way. He's not Windu, who's just ready, who's kind of like the librarian, ready to say, but it's here. It says this here. This is how it is.
I touched on the Jedi's diminished ability to use the Force previously, but there are a few different explanations, so I'm going to cover that again. First off, Darth Sidious and his master, Darth Plagueis, performed a Sith ritual which caused the balance of the Force to be shifted further towards the dark side, and I think that's the original reason I gave for why this happened.
Yeah.
We have learned recently, in the past year or so, a new novel came out, and it's from the High Republic series, which the High Republic series is 200 years before these movies, when the Jedi were at the height of their power and in control. But essentially, in one of those novels, pain, suffering, fear, all the dark side emotional stuff causes ripples in the Force, and because it's a shitty time to be around, the Republic's faltering, there's a lot of slavery, these horrible problems they can't solve, those emotions are coming through in spades, which is causing a little bit of that diminishment. It's strengthening Palpatine and Dooku at this point, but it's making the Jedi
You can tell Palpatine is positively glowing at this point.
And then there's also just the idea that it's Palpatine himself. He's essentially one of the most powerful dark entities to ever exist. He's simply causing the issues purely by being alive and in close proximity to them. Any of them are possible. It's more of a headcanon thing.
And it'll shift more, too, you would think, too, because, like, Anakin being so powerful and clearly evil.
Yes. Anakin is actually now asleep in bed, and he's got his man nipples out. But it's not all fun and games for the Padawan learner.
Not those Portman dreams he was hoping for.
No, he's having a nightmare again and hearing the anguished cries of his mother, Shmi Skywalker, calling out for him. He awakens in a sweat, screaming, "No!" But not like that. That happens, I don't know, maybe 4 hours from now.
Right.
3.5 hours. The following morning, Anakin is standing on the balcony facing the sunset and meditating, and Padme comes wandering out groggy and in her nightgown. She approaches him, but he doesn't make a move or say anything, so she turns to leave, and he tells her not to go because
I
he
bet she
finds
was
her presence
disappointed.
soothing.
She's like, damn it, I thought I was going to get out of here undetected.
She asks about his nightmare the previous night. He tells her that Jedi don't have nightmares.
I'm strong and tough, and I don't get upset.
They have visions. He pauses, then tells her that he saw his mother suffering. She's in pain, and although he knows he's disobeying his mandate, he has to go help his mother. Padme actually agrees to go with him, and the screen wipes on an unsettling note. But don't worry, action awaits. Jango and Boba are loading up their groceries onto their ship, and Kenobi's running after him with the intent of taking him to the Jedi Council, willingly or not. With lightning and rain pouring all around them, Jango tells Boba to get in the ship as Kenobi ignites his lightsaber. Now, before we continue with this part, I want to talk about, at this point, Jango's ship, Boba's ship for most of the series, because it was called Slave One. In the old Legends continuity before this movie, I couldn't tell you why it was named that. There were some rumors that have come around. I don't know. That game I mentioned earlier, Star Wars Bounty Hunter with Jango, basically his backstory is he was one of the Death Watch Mandalorians, but his clan is wiped out by Count Dooku as a Jedi.
Oh.
It was a fight or a war or something or other. Wipes him out. Anyway, he gets caught and basically becomes a slave, not for the Republic, but for somebody. He gets, tossed into slavery. They had several spaceships that would transport stuff, and they were all called Slave 1, Slave 2, Slave 3, because they were used by the slaves. He steals one, that's this one, and that becomes his ship. So that's how it became in canon. Obviously, the name slave,
when you take it out
has
of
some
context, especially.
Yes, some negative connotations. Because in case you don't know, Brian, America, where we are recording this, has a very bad history with slavery.
Almost so bad that it's halfway still in effect in terms of how people are treated.
So now that it's the 2020s, and a whole bunch of the descendants of those people who were forced into slave labor are now Star Wars fans, Disney, or the people that run Star Wars, whoever, have decided that they don't want to refer to it as Slave One anymore.
Probably the right call.
They're going to call it Boba Fett Starship or Fire Spray, which is the model of ship, which Fire Spray is pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Here are my thoughts on this. This is a contentious thing, and it drives me nuts when it's this contentious. My heritage is not of slavery. I have Native American blood and a whole hodgepodge of white people blood. So you could argue there's some Native American stuff, but that doesn't matter. Overall, I don't have, what's the term? A fish in the game? A horse in the race?
I think either, now,
I'll go with that.
The horse in the race works. I don't know what game fish are playing. Go fish, I guess, is right there.
So I don't have a horse in this race. However, if any one person out there has a problem with this name, just change it. It doesn't matter. It's a fictional universe.
And I'd imagine there's a slew of people who are angry and like it's actually ruining their day that a Star Wars name of a ship was changed from something that is objectively irresponsible at this point.
Oh, people are furious. And look, it's the world we live in. It's just those kind of people have a voice now.
Yeah.
Or a louder voice, at least.
It's just so doubly frustrating as more and more real world issues are presenting themselves in larger scale. And then more and more very protected, safe people are hopping online to lose their minds over stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. It's who cares? Just change it. I'm not going to call it Slave One again.
Just chill out. It's Star Wars. I mean, we've established like these things are, Star Wars is supposed to be, I think, fun. And like you can hold your entertainments accountable for their quality, but this has no bearing on the quality of the thing you're watching.
Yeah,
the name of a ship.
So who cares? Well, this fight between Jango and Kenobi is a fairly long one, but there are a few things I do want to cover here. First off, Obi-Wan gets shot with explosions multiple times.
Pretty cool.
I do have to say, I really enjoy in almost every movie he's in, he gets ragdolled in some capacity. The last episode, Darth Maul knocked him off these big walkways. This time he gets knocked around here, and Geonosis in the battle, he gets knocked around a bit. Revenge of the Sith, the next movie, he gets both Dooku flinging him around with the Force and General Grievous backhanding him with his robot arms. It's fun seeing Kenobi just get knocked around, but still, he does well.
He's like Chumbawamba, you know? He gets knocked down, but he does get back up again.
That he does. From a lore perspective, if you're watching the scene, we get to see a Jedi in a real Mandalorian fight, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Kenobi has this all-powerful ability that helps him move things with his brain, and yet Jango's a dude, just some guy, and he can not only hold his own, but do some major damage to him.
And he's got a lot of cool Batman-type tools, too.
And they had to be able to
be able to compete. It should also be noted that Boba, while 15 or 9, depending on who you ask, does not give a shit. He is in the ship and willing to fire at Obi-Wan from in that ship.
It's his dad, man.
Yeah.
Gotta protect him. They've got a good bond.
Well, I liked that, though. That they I mean, maybe this isn't the most radical thing, but they had the child essentially
participate.
He was trained to do this, so he would.
Jango and Kenobi both get knocked off a ledge, and thanks to some cool lasso work, Obi-Wan doesn't plunge to the ocean below, but he does get knocked down a level, and he has to quickly rush back through the building to get back to Jango. But at this point, the two Fets have climbed on their ship, and started to fly away. But before it gets away, Obi-Wan basically fastballs a homing beacon onto the ship so he can track where it's going.
Which this really gave me some GoldenEye feelings of throwing those little timer mines onto those tanks.
In the dam.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Brian, with that, we're going to put an end to Star Wars Attack of the Clones Part 1.
Whoa. What will happen? Will Anakin turn good?
I wonder.
We'll find out.
Whenever we come back, we will be discussing Anakin and Padme meeting an old friend. We've got Obi-Wan discovering the secret to the Separatist movement, and of course, getting to meet Wat Tambor, leader of the Techno Union. And then we get to witness the beginning of the fabled Clone Wars with the exciting and devastating Battle of Geonosis. We'll talk our final thoughts on this movie next episode. So before we get out of here, let's do some quick plugs. We've talked Bootu Boys. That's our other show on the Bootu Inc. Podcast Network. Go check it out. Brian Spencer and I make fun of some shows. It's a lot of fun. Of course, the Bootu Inc. Podcast Network has many shows, and we appreciate everyone listening in. If you really like what we do, head on over to patreon.com/Bootu Inc., where all of our content's free. We just like people listening to it, so go check it out.
But you can give us credits if you want.
Yeah, go ahead and subscribe. Send us some credits because it helps keep the network afloat.
Yeah,
and
we have
makes my life a lot
to
easier.
pay the Federation.
I have a YouTube channel where I occasionally post stuff. Some more Star Wars stuff coming up soon and clips from this. And then we're both on Twitter. Again, I'm at Manly Vanley. You are
at Loud Guitar Brian.
Anything else before we get out of here today, Brian?
Oh, I'll just real quick say that we're halfway through this movie, and it's done nothing to change my mind that it might be the worst of the 9. We'll see if the second half can redeem us next week, as if I don't know, as if I haven't already seen it several times, including twice this week.
Also, it's better. The second half's better.
It's better than the first half.
Yes.
Yeah.
So until next time, I want everyone to spend some time thinking about being held snugly in Dexter Jettster's many powerful arms, so closely that you can feel his mustache tickle the back of your neck as he nuzzles you gently. Podcast, a Star Wars story.